Good evening, everybody. Welcome to, it feels like the first, but it's really the second meeting of the Health, Environment, Social Services Committee of Community Board 2 for the fall season of 2021. My name is Brandon Smith. I'm the chair of the committee, and there is a list of protocol items that I have to read off at the beginning of every virtual meeting. Please pay attention to it, though. It may seem like boilerplate, but it really is important stuff that we need to remember. First, this meeting is called to order and is being recorded for public access and archiving in accordance with the New York State Open Meeting Law. It's the practice of Community Board 2 to conduct remote meetings with all committee members' cameras on. Public attendees are also encouraged to leave their cameras on, particularly if you were given the floor to speak. All attendees, please keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking. To maintain an appropriate discussion and voting process, I will make it known when and which topics are open for comment by committee members, board members at large, and the general public. If you have questions that fall outside of public comment time, please type your questions in the chat panel and we will address them as time permits. You may also email the district office at any time outside of these meetings. We are committed to providing access for all of our neighbors, regardless of physical ability or limitation. If you require accommodation or assistance for full participation, please contact the district office 72 hours before any public meeting. I also want to say, because we have folks who attend this meeting who have physical disabilities and can benefit from us speaking a little bit slower, or if we're showing slides, describe what's on the slide. Although we are trying to have an efficient meeting tonight, it's important and helpful that everybody has access to hear what we're talking about. So please try to take those steps and be considerate of others in that regard. I guess that's covered also by this next item. We ask that those speaking or presenting use plain language, speak at a moderate tone, frequently ask if you're speaking loud enough, if presenting, read the title of every slide and describe any images on the slide, such as photos, graphs, and charts. We'll do a brief roll call of the committee, but I just want to note a couple of other things at the outset. First of all, this is a committee that handles matters of health, racial disparities in health, environmental issues like climate change, social services, which includes issues like homelessness, as well as liquor licenses, all of which have matters of great enthusiasm and interest in the community. With that, there is often occasionally the tendency for us to take steps that we may not be using in the most respectful manner. And I want to just encourage everyone and make it sure that it's known that it's our committee's practice to treat everyone with respect, regardless of whom is speaking on this committee, or any member of the public or any presenter to the committee. So I want everyone to consider that we need to be respectful of each other's space in that regard. And as we function by Robert's rules, any comments or concerns are not to be directed at presenters or at members of the public. They're to be directed at the chair, me, of the committee. So with those ground rules for our committee, I would like to start with a brief roll call of the committee members and board members we have here. We can start with you, Jessica.
Thanks, Brandon. Hi, I'm Jessica Thurston. I'm the secretary.
Great. Next on my squares is Monique. And let me just give a special welcome to Monique as a new member of our committee. We're happy to have you and welcome, and hope that you enjoy your experience with us here.
Thank you. Good evening, Monique Cumberbatch, board member.
Great. Thank you, Monique. Barry? I think you're on mute, Barry, or here we go.
Barry Newmark, public member.
Thanks, Barry. Let's see, Nicole.
Good evening, Nicole McKnight, board member.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And my square's completely shifted, so I lost track of everybody. Alejandro.
Thanks, Brandon. Hi, everyone. Alejandro Varela, public member.
Hi, Alejandro. Emily?
Couldn't find my mute button. Emily Anadu, public member.
Hi, Emily, thanks. Let's see. Now, this is never the most efficient way to see, but I don't see any other board members or committee members. If I missed you,
Sorry.
oh, Latrell. Latrell, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Latrell Masso, board member. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Carol Ann, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Carol Ann Church, Assistant District Manager and Staff Liaison to the Health Committee.
Great. And it looks like, do we have, Mr. Andrews, are you on the line?
Mr. Andrews, you are actually unmuted, but you just muted yourself. Can you come back off mute? Mr. Andrews is muted.
Okay. Victor Andrews, a member of our committee. We're happy to have him. Lindsay, are you also on the line?
I believe Ms. Einhorn might be having some technical difficulties. She sent a note that she'll be here in a second.
Yep, I'm here, got it.
Oh, there's Mr.
Hi,
Andrews.
Victor. It was just for you to introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, it's Victor. Hi, guys.
Thanks for coming. It's nice to see you.
Yep.
Great. We are so blessed and lucky to have our whole committee here at the beginning of the meeting, and we can begin with a approval of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion? Anybody want to make a motion for the
Oh,
agenda?
no.
I think Barry did.
Second.
Okay. All right. I saw Jessica's hand before you, Victor, so I'm giving Jessica the second and I'm giving
Yep.
Barry the motion. Okay. All in favor, can you either raise your hand or say aye?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? And anybody abstain? Okay. Agenda for tonight's meeting is approved. Next on the agenda, we've got a presentation on our COVID-19 updates. And before Barry launches into it, I just want to note tonight's meeting, we're aiming to get everybody through this meeting and out of the meeting in an orderly fashion. And particularly given that our June meeting lasted 4 hours, we're aiming to have a much shorter meeting this time that is condensed and appropriately gives enough time for each issue to be heard. So with that in mind, there have been specific spaces allocated on the agenda for the amount of time each subject is due to take. We're not going to be militant about it, but we're not going to stray far from the minutes that are indicated on the agenda. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Barry for a 5-minute update on COVID-19.
Thank you, Brandon, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all. I will be very brief. For those of you who haven't been to any of these meetings, I've been keeping track, thanks to the City of New York, of a number of key indicators regarding the pandemic. We look at different neighborhoods that make up CD2, and we're looking at new cases in the past 7 days, the total number of cumulative cases, the number of deaths in each area, and vaccination rates of at least 1 dose. So new cases in the past 7 days in parts of CD2 and nearby neighborhoods are lower than the rate per 100,000 for New York City, which is 115, and Brooklyn, which is 132. The outliers are as follows. Borum Hill is lower than Brooklyn's rate, higher than New York City's rate. East New York, Williamsburg, and Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights are higher than both Brooklyn and New York City's rate. Numerically, just to give you a sense of it, Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo, downtown Brooklyn, Fort Greene, Bed-Stuy, Clinton Hill have had 105 cases in the past 7 days. Williamsburg South has had 110. Borum Hill, Park Slope has had 122. Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights, 133, and Williamsburg East North has had, unfortunately, a higher number of 173. looking at total cumulative cases so far per $100,000, sorry, via per 100,000 residents thus far, are lower in all of our neighborhoods than in Brooklyn and New York City. So that's a good thing. Another good thing is that deaths per 100,000 thus far are lower in our neighborhoods than the rate for Brooklyn, which is 417, and New York City, which is 408. So those are two really good things to be grateful for. And overall, vaccine rates have been going up each month in all our areas. Right now, however, Fort Greene, Bed-Stuy, Williamsburg, and parts of Clinton Hill have lower rates of vaccination than Brooklyn and NYC. Other parts of our community district and nearby neighborhoods have higher rates of vaccination than Brooklyn and NYC. Just to put numbers to that, the lowest rate is in Fort Greene, Bed-Stuy, Clinton Hill, and this is for people who've had at least one dose, and it's at 55%. Next lowest is Williamsburg South at 58%. I'm sorry, Williamsburg East and North at 57%, Williamsburg South at 58%. And then we get up to the areas that are doing a bit better. Borum Hill, Park Slope is at 71%. Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights is 79%. And Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo, downtown Brooklyn, which includes a number of the NYCHA houses, is at 83%, which is a really good rate. The Brooklyn rate overall is 63%, and the New York City rate overall is 71%. And these numbers are as of, I guess, a day or two ago. So they're pretty up to date. I was getting this together during the ball game last night. So, and that's my report. I hope I did it in less than 5 minutes, Brandon.
You did. Thank you, Barry. And that's great. I really appreciate your work. COVID-19 is something that we have been focused on much in every single meeting in the past year. And Barry, your reports are very helpful. I want to remind everyone we do have the Department of Health planned on the docket to be coming to visit us again in the next month or two to talk about COVID-19 progress, and we can chat about specific neighborhoods and issues that persist. But at this time, I'll open it up for comments or questions for Barry from board members first, or board and committee members first, and then from members of the public who are here at the meeting. I'll try to scroll through to see if I can find if anybody has a question or comment.
Brandon, this is Alejandro. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Barry, for the report. I didn't catch the 83% was for what exactly? What did that measure?
That measures the percentage of residents in Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo, and downtown Brooklyn who have had at least one vaccination dose.
At least one vaccine. And do we have a sense of how rollout has been in this district? Which is to say, like, obviously there are always socioeconomic factors at play, but have there been campaigns concentrated in certain areas in the community that you're aware of, or is anyone aware of how it's been sort of promoted within our district? The vaccine, that is.
Yeah, I personally am not aware of it.
Can I say something? This is Latrell. I know Congressman Jeffries teamed up with the Farragut stakeholders in the Farragut houses, and also in the Farragut in Fort Greene community, Imbassaw and Walt Whitman. And he did like a book bag give back day, and he also had a vaccination truck in the community. So that was like one way to get the community involved to get vaccinated, and also to get tested in the summertime.
Thank you.
Right, and at a couple of meetings that we've had, there's been sorry, I'll let you speak in just a second, Mr. Du. I didn't see that we had you here, but I do like your background. There have been a few announcements at a few different meetings about different programs that have been fostering more vaccinations, which I think we discussed at some of our later meetings in the first half of the year. I remember something about the door having a program. I remember there being some involvement of the borough president's office and Nan Blackshear coming here and speaking about it. but that's just what strikes me off the top of my head. John, you also had a comment. I'm sorry we didn't introduce you at the beginning, so feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Brandon. In terms of the public housing projects in the district, the Myrtle Avenue Business Improvement District runs a food pantry. And in those packages, when we did the home delivery, as well as when we have the organized locational delivery of food, we include information about vaccines and where to go. And we might have even provided a specific location from time to time where folks in the district could go and get the vaccines. So we do actually give specific information routinely, because we do understand that some folks need to hear this on a regular in order to access those services. Thank you. That's it.
Great.
I have a
Emily,
question.
go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Barry, for the report. So just a question in terms of follow-up. From what I've seen, like in Brooklyn data, that while the numbers you have point to us doing well compared to the city, that there still seems to be some pretty big disparities amongst the various racial groups in terms of like how many have had one group with it's like Asian Pacific Islanders with the highest, Native Americans second, and then Black and white actually surprisingly even in terms of vaccination rates. So it's great to hear from Latrell that there's been some efforts made, specifically in some of the NYCHA housing and things, but just wondering if there's anything that we could be, one, if we can get more granular data within our community district to see if those same disparities exist that we're seeing across just the borough generally and the city generally. And then if so, if there's any specific, outreach that we can do based on that. So potentially giving myself some fun work to do with Barry, but I'm happy to help you dig into any of those numbers. But I would be interested just to see, if we're seeing the disparities racially that the city is seeing in our district.
Well, thank you, Emily. I appreciate you mentioning that. And honestly, I would jump at the chance to have you engaged in any additional research project or presentation, given how amazing your last one was. Barry, do you have anything that you wanted to add to Emily's comment, or would you be interested in working with her to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this subject?
I'd love to do that, because I was very impressed with the work that Emily's done thus far. And it would be very helpful to have more granular data. I agree.
Awesome.
Okay, so Barry, I'll touch base with you to see, I'll share the data I have, like the borough level, but then I'll see what we can do in terms of digging into our census tracts.
Sounds good.
And if you can let me know about the timing on it, it doesn't have to be, but maybe it's something we can coordinate with our upcoming presentation from Department of Health.
And remind me when that presentation is. We don't have a specific.
I don't want to hold the board office to it, but I will. I'll touch base with you offline. But I'm hoping it'll be in the next month or two.
Okay.
Lindsay, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I do have access to a couple of the different data. I have access to some data. So if you have some gaps that you're looking for specific data, let me, I don't want to sign up for a whole project yet. But if there's specific data points that you're looking for, I can help you identify the appropriate sources.
That's great.
Thank you, Lindsay.
We can keep it in mind. Awesome. Cool. Any other questions or comments for Barry's presentation about COVID-19 updates? And I'll open it up to the public just so that we have an opportunity for anybody else to raise their comment or question. Okay, wonderful. So we're done with that item. I see we've been joined by board member Carolyn Hubbard coming in weary. Carolyn, did you want to briefly introduce yourself? We're honored to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, Carolyn Hubbard Weary. I'm a member of the board and of the Parks Committee, and I try to get to these meetings as much as I can.
It's amazing to have you, and we're honored. Thank you. we're going to move along in our agenda to the next topic, which is a presentation from National Grid, one of our energy providers who has been gracious enough to send a few representatives here to speak with us tonight. Just going to note with regard to National Grid that we've asked them to speak particularly about climate change as it relates to storm resiliency, protecting their infrastructure, and some of their specific plans for how they're addressing climate change within their organization. We're also lucky to have ConEd, who's got a representative who's going to speak to us a little bit later. First presentation is going for 25 minutes. I would ask that you try to do the best to have the most robust information presented as concisely, but also as eloquently as possible. But overall, I just want to say thank you for coming, giving us your time. We greatly appreciate you being here, and we look forward to a great discussion. Do we have Don, Dennis, and Paul here, or somebody different?
Yes. So this is Renee. This is Renee McClure. How are you, Brandon?
I am great, but your audio seems to be a little slow by my check.
Okay. So my name is Renee McClure. I'm the manager for the New York City team from National. And in speaking with Carol Ann, she had asked us to share some information about what we're doing at National Grid to the topics that you had mentioned. There were some questions that she had sent to us. And so we have 3 individuals on the call this evening. One, and it'll go in this order, Paul Smith, who's going to talk about our service line agreements in line with local law 152. There is sometimes because the projects are so close, often people think that we're doing the local law 152. And so Paul is going to talk about the service line inspections and the differences. And then we have Dennis McDermott from our cybersecurity team, who will look to address the questions that were posed to us in that space. And then we have Don Shabazpour, who's going to talk to us about net zero climate change and the number of things at National Grid and initiatives that we have underway. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul Smith at this time. Thank you. Again, thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Carol, for reaching out and securing the questions that we look to answer. The only question that we will not be able to answer this evening is in regards to our disaster recovery. Our team was unavailable this evening, but we look forward to coming back and sharing information about that subject matter as well. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we respect the fact that you've got specific people who are experts in particular areas, and we're happy to work with you in that regard. Okay, so who's first here?
Paul Smith.
Hi, good evening. This is Paul Smith. I was asked to talk about the differences between the service line inspection program, which is New York State Public Service Commission mandated for all gas utilities to inspect all gas services that are inside, from the point of entry valve at the foundation wall up to the gas meters. This inspection covers gas leaks using an indicator device, and it's also a visual check, signs of corrosion and any abnormal or substandard conditions. This is a 3-year, every re-inspection every 3 years, 36 months, not to exceed 39 months. And again, it's New York State mandated program that we started back in 2017, 2018. It often gets confused with the local law, New York City local law 152, which covers the inspection of all buildings' interior gas pipings that are visible. And it requires every 3 or 4-year period covered by community board, bunch of community boards every year, which I think Community Board 2 falls into the 2021, which would have to have all within December 31st of 2021. This inspection is covered by licensed master plumbers that are hired by the property owners, and it covers all buildings except those classified as an occupancy group of R3, which is roughly 1 and 2 family buildings. So those are not covered under the local law 152. At this time, the utility inspection and the local law 152 inspection are separate because master licensed plumbers licensed by New York City are not operator qualified to cover on the federal description, which the utility inspectors are. It's called operator qualification 86/87. New York City plumbers, National Grid is working with the plumbing industry, the Plumbing Foundation, the Master Plumbers of New York City, and they are being tested and are being part of the program for OpQual 87/86/87. In the future, National Grid is working with the foundation in order to have or incentives, provide rebates or incentives to homeowners that do hire these qualified plumbers to do their inspections, because they can also then complete the utility inspection at the same time and record those results. So this saves the ratepayer money, and it also provides the homeowner a rebate or an incentive back on them on the cost of that they incur when they hire a plumber to do their local law 152. So there is a difference trying to bring the programs in together. Right now, the local law 153 is every 4 years, where New York State utility inspection program is every 3 years. So we're trying to work with the city and the city council, and maybe they're going to bring these amendments together so that we can bring it into a coordinated effort over the same timeframes. And I have nothing else on that, if anyone has any questions.
I think it would be good if we go through each of the presentations and we can take the questions at the end. Renee, would you be able to identify who's up next here?
Sure. We have Dennis McDermott from our cybersecurity team. He's up next. Dennis?
Hi, everybody. Good evening, and thank you very much to the board for inviting us. As Renee said, I'm Dennis McDermott. I'm the security officer at National Grid for the New York business unit and the gas operations. And I think the question that was posed was essentially what protocols do we have in place to prevent a cybersecurity incident, particularly in reference to Colonial Pipeline, which of course has been very present in the news. And so that's actually a good starting point. So based on what's known about Colonial Pipeline, what happened with them was that a password was stolen or compromised or figured out because a former employee had used it for one of their personal accounts, and that allowed some bad actor to gain access to their systems remotely. So they used one of their remote access virtual private networks. They used those stolen credentials to gain access. There was no multi-factor authentication. I'm sorry, I should say, I know there was an admonition that we should use plain language at the beginning, but cybersecurity and plain language don't always go along. So please, feel free in question time to parse any of this out as needed. But essentially, there was nothing other than that username and password to prevent the bad actor from getting access. And then once that happened, they installed some ransomware. And I think what was Colonial didn't shut its pipeline down because the pipeline systems were actually compromised, and it turned out after the fact that they were able to confirm that. But what happened was a lot of their customer systems were compromised, and they weren't sure whether anything else was compromised. Right, out of an abundance of caution, they shut down the flow of gas. Okay, so that's kind of the situation as it happened with Colonial, and now in comparison to that, let me kind of outline what we have in place to make sure that wouldn't happen. And so the first thing would be what I mentioned earlier, which is multi-factor authentication, and that's something we take very seriously at National Grid. So there is no remote access to any of our systems that does not require a second authentication factor beyond username and password. And now most people are familiar with this. In a lot of cases, it'll be an SMS text or something like that to your phone. In our case, it's a much more secure authenticator app that we use. But even if somebody had stolen a username or password, you still have that requirement that the employee has to verify on their device that it's actually them logging in. So that's one item, multi-factor for remote access. The second item was, as I said, at least my understanding of Colonial was this was a terminated employee. Somebody had been terminated for a while, and their credentials were later compromised. We take the identity of legitimate employees very seriously. We've put a lot of effort into integrating our identity and access management systems with our HR systems. So that, of course, HR is the most current data. When somebody terminates in the HR system, they terminate in identity. And so we wouldn't have a situation where somebody terminated and then their credentials were still active a few months later. So that's sort of the second big pillar, that integration of identity. And then the third thing I would say, I mentioned there was that uncertainty around whether the bad guy could have jumped from the compromised systems to the actual control systems. And that's the other area I would call out, where we have very, very strong segmentation between what we call our enterprise or corporate systems and the systems that actually control the flow of gas or the flow of power and things like that. And that's been tested, actually. We just went through a design review with Homeland Security on that, where they actually tested some of our our network traffic and things like that. And so our aim is to keep those systems separate and to make sure that if there were any question, that we could quickly pull the plug, so to speak, between the two. And even if our corporate systems were compromised or went down, our control systems over gas and power would keep operating, and we test that constantly. So those are the major points in relation to Colonial. I mean, cybersecurity is a big topic, so I'm happy to answer anything beyond that in the question period. But I think, in respect of the time, I'll leave it there. And again, thank you very much for inviting us tonight.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. Like with the other, we'll take the other questions. We'll take the questions at the end. But I can say, I think that may have been my question, and I really appreciated your response, because it was very to the point and explained exactly where it was. So thank you very much for that. Renee, would you be able to indicate who's next?
Sure. And we have Don Shabazpour, who is our subject matter expert in climate change, net zero, and everything around that space. So, Don he's spoken at a lot of events, as well as our others, our other speakers have been engaged in speaking on our behalf. So just looking forward to hearing from Don. And Don?
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. So I'll quickly just cover two categories of questions. One of them was about system resiliency, what we have done, and then the other one was the broader climate change strategy and achieving net zero by 2050. So first, let me address the system resiliency question and what we have done very specifically in our neighborhoods in New York City. People in this community will remember Superstorm Sandy. That was a really wake-up call for us. I think since then we went into really stepped up our efforts. And what we did specifically after Superstorm Sandy, we started to conduct a deep dive research, a system risk assessment of our entire infrastructure system. And what we started was identifying areas that were prone to flooding. And we started transferring those areas that were, flood prone from low pressure system to high pressure system. What that basically means, if a similar event takes place, that the gas outage will not occur. And Superstorm Sandy, actually, in New York City and part of Long Island, we had the largest gas outage. The areas that we identified immediately were areas that you can imagine. It was, the Rockaway Beach, the Breezy Point, and we have actually converted those systems from low pressure to high pressure for our gas system. And then from there, we also went to identify our regulator stations that are prone to flooding. We looked at 100-year flood zone, 500-year flood zones, and then we hardened those assets as well. And if you just not to get technical, what basically gate station means, that's how you feed natural gas to a neighborhood. So we made sure if there is another event like Superstorm Sandy, we don't have a gas outage. and we strengthen those assets where they can operate actually underwater. We put things that things known as vent protections. So that's like very specific storm hardening resiliency that we have done. We were the first to do it actually in the country, and it was really as a result of Superstorm Sandy. So that's I want to cover that. The second is this broad question of net zero, and I'll keep my comments here brief, and then we can get into the Q&A because it's such a broad topic, right? What I'll basically say, we have committed to net zero, and this includes our customers' emissions, meaning the natural gas and the electricity that we sell is included in that ambition. We have a template on our website, and the things that you can imagine, integrating energy efficiency, solar and wind, and other technologies that you haven't heard of. And what we are really doing as a company is we are engaging really anyone who is interested in working with us on this. And it's a very big space, right? We are talking about the transformation, and the transition is underway, but I'll just sort of highlight the category of the buckets, and then we can come back and address them. So one of them is regulatory, right? We are doing a lot in that space in our rate cases, which I can come back to and discuss in more details, specifically now downstate New York State, but we're downstate New York City and Long Island rate cases. But we are basically making the transition to integrating low carbon fuels as part of our net zero, which is decarbonizing the gas network. We are doing a lot in the regulatory space. In New York City, that means how do we actually implement local law 97? How do we think about integrating in energy efficiency and the customer programs that we are offering? And then there is another category under legislation. And here is legislation means, all level, at every level of the government. So in New York, we are specifically engaged on CLCPA. At the federal level, we're actually engaged, what you're hearing in the front of the newspapers every day, it's on the front pages. The infrastructure fund, the House reconciliation bill that's actually under consideration. We are involved in that process. There is another category of the customer programs, which I briefly alluded to, that also touches local law 97. But we are, I think, integrating into our customer offering the most progressive and the aggressive energy efficiency programs in the country. And then there's this other category, which I call Project C. Some of you may remember from the Brooklyn Union days, this was Project Cinderella. And Renee, I may come back to you to provide more context, but this is really engaging our community to make sure that really no one is left behind, right? How do we make this transformation without leaving customers behind that are able to afford these technologies, but also make sure that's equitable? So, when you ask about, what is the company doing in this area of climate change and how we are transitioning, it's a very big category of effort. And I just wanted to sort of give you a brief snapshot of each category. And with that, I'll stop and we'll turn now to Q&A, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I know we're going to have a lot of Q&A, and I want to get everybody's comments considered. I think the one thing I would say, particularly on the last piece about climate change, is that what I would really want to know, and my own opinion is really that climate change is not something that we just have to deal with. It's really an emergency, and I'm hopeful that what you can explain is not just what's in the cards for the future, but really how is National Grid treating climate change as an emergency in what it's doing. But I'll leave that as a framework for other people's questions, and I'll open it up to the committee to ask their questions. I already see Jessica's hand is raised, so I'll give her the floor.
Thanks, Brandon. Thank you all for this. I really appreciate your concision, but also the information that you've shared. To the last point about climate change, I really appreciate the way you framed that, Brandon. I agree. And I think, the other hat I wear during the day is I lead sustainability and ESG for a major media company. So leaning on, I know how challenging it is to develop a net zero goal, get that buy-in to the commitment, map out how you get there. So I really appreciate that is my day job. And appreciate you explaining all of that. With that said, when you say that a priority is to ensure no one is left behind, National Grid is a utility. And that has to mean leaving no one behind has to mean that you factor in the externalities of the work that you all do. To that end, I'd like to hear if there's any way to respond to this succinctly. What can we do to ensure that there is no pipeline in North Brooklyn? Fracking natural gas, it might be lower carbon, but it absolutely leaves people behind and really perpetuates environmental racism. And it's a huge problem. So I'd love to hear how that factors into your climate change priorities as a company and what the community can do to continue to encourage National Grid to not move forward with this plan.
Great. Maybe I'll start providing some of Jessica, the analytical work that,
Sure.
we have done. And then maybe, I don't know, Renee, if you want to talk about sort of more on the community level. So let me just start out the previous question about, our priority. I would say like climate change is the #1 priority for the corporation. When you look at, what we have done, we have committed to net zero. Everything we're doing is about transition. So we do view it as an emergency. And, going back, just to provide some context, right? We, during the Obama administration, we were one of the first utilities that immediately, agreed with the Paris Agreement. During the Trump administration, we were one of the companies that publicly opposed coming out of the Paris Agreement. And this gives you a context for, how serious the company is. So now let me just sort of specifically address your question, right? How do we get to this? It is an incredibly important question. And we here in New York City are extremely passionate about this. And one of the things that, in our discussions with all of you, the community boards, the legislators, the policymakers, and the mayor's office, one thing that we always thought was missing was a deep dive analysis, right? Can we do just our homework, right? From an analytical perspective of what would it take to get where we want to by 2050? And Jessica, we did that. We actually conducted a 2-year study, and we partnered with ConEdison and the mayor's office. And this was the first study of its kind. I don't know any other place in the country where the government and the utilities partner, and we brought really the top consultants to give us this insight. We can do an entire deep dive conversation community board about that study one day, and it's posted on New York City Mayor's website. But let me just sort of distill it, right? Distill what the study said. The study basically says you need to do everything that you're doing now, and you also need to accelerate it. And every solution on the table needs to be integrated, and you would still fall short, and you still need additional solutions that you're not doing that you need to do over time. I do want to address about, what you talked about, the gas network. The study basically says that you do need the gas network in between now and 2050, and it will actually play an integral component to achieve net zero. So the gas is an enduring role as a network, but you need to transform what's actually flowing through the gas network. And the study gets into the details, but basically we are transitioning, right, from delivering molecules that are natural gas today to lower carbon molecules that will be biogenic or hydrogen. And I know that gets technical, but in a nutshell, here's what I would say, Jessica. Think of the gas network exactly same as the electricity network. The electricity network is being decarbonized, right, by delivering electricity that's coming from solar and wind. And the exact transformation is taking place on the gas network. And that is a journey that, that will take 3 decades. And there are different things that we will be doing over time. So think of it over 30 years, time horizon, and temporal. There's a temporal element to this. What you can do today, which are the technologies everyone on this call is familiar with, you really do aggressive energy efficiency. So that's here and now, right? You begin to electrify light, transportation, which is light duty vehicles, and you begin to integrate solar and wind and accelerate the acceleration of those technology, meaning adopting them. And then at the same time, you begin to transform the gas network to deliver these low carbon molecules. I know that was somewhat technical, but it is the massive transformation that will take place that will decarbonize both electricity and gas networks. And I can come back to you at some point, the community board, you and others, to talk about detail which project, what are you doing, and I can talk about that as well. That was sort of analytical and the technical work that we are doing that's sort of positioning us to get to net zero. And I don't know, Renee, if you would like to add anything else. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to the community board for additional questions.
No, Don, I think you covered it. I know from Project C, it's a big initiative where we're looking at through the leadership of our recently appointed president, Rudy Winter, on how we're going to move these initiatives forward, not only from that perspective, but also from the community perspective, and continuing to educate the community through forums like this on a number of things and initiatives that we have underway. So I think it's great. One of the other things we're looking at, from Project C involves, how do we, get our neighborhoods, like the NIP program, which is similar to the Cinderella program. If anyone is familiar with the Cinderella, where we actually provided grants to those organizations and that's restructuring or doing rehabs or doing new development in the energy space. So we're looking to see how we can support in that initiative, and it does not, the grant does not require that it has gas. We're looking for sustainability. We're looking for energy efficiencies. We're looking for those type of things in the buildings and the projects that support the community. We're also looking at workforce development. With this new direction, there's going to be a lot of job opportunities that are going to be coming available. We're looking, how do we get in that space when we're trying to provide jobs in that space? So that's another big initiative for us for workforce development. We're looking at how do we give back to the communities when it comes to when we're coming into an area and we're doing work, how do we make it better? We're looking at how do we green the space. So there's another many initiatives that we have on the at the forefront of looking to implement. I'm not sure if anyone is aware, but September 17th was the kickoff of our Project C, which involved over 1,000 hours of volunteers giving back to the community, doing green space, touching pantries and just being a part of the community. So more to come on that space, but there's a lot of things and initiatives that you'll hear about moving forward.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I also want to make sure we try to make it through everybody's questions. At the same time, I just want to note, I'm going to be 60 years old in 2050, and it's a rather long period of time from now. I want to understand a little bit, how do we get there? Why is 2050 the magical year when things are going to be solved by? And there's this whole document that we found, our contribution, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that lists a bunch of stuff that had to be done by 2020. Try to avoid me listing out all the things that are listed in there about different issues, but is there anything that's listed in there about the 2020 goals that was not completed?
Brandon, I guess that was me. I have to review that document. I'm not familiar with it. I don't know if Renee, if you have it, that I could see the 2020 targets. And I will look at it and review, get back to you.
Habitat Magazine, just do it.
The one thing I will say, Brandon, which was actually a really good question, you said, why 2050, right? 2050 is a long way off. The reason you'll see people talk about 2050, basically that's what the scientific community is saying, you need to reduce your emissions by that time. But you're right, that's a long way off. What we are developing all of these strategies over between now and then. And that's why, I didn't get into our net zero plan. We actually have started breaking that down, and so has the state, and now working with the city. Where do you want to be? Where do you have to be in 2025, 2030, 2035? And going back to my earlier comments, the things that we can do today that lower emissions at the lowest possible cost is the low-hanging fruit, to simplify it, right? We're trying to accelerate the adoption of those, which is primarily for the next 5 years, is really energy efficiency. And then over time, it's about decarbonization of both electricity and the gas network.
Okay, well, I appreciate the response on that point. And if you can, I pasted the link in the chat of our contribution. So maybe if we could get a confirmation back to the board office about that point, that would be really helpful. I mean, the one thing I just want to consider is just, I don't think, regardless of how old I'm going to be in 2050, I don't know if we have enough time as a society to wait until 2050. And I'm hopeful that you'll look at ways to accelerate the timeline and maybe get some stuff done a little bit sooner than that on that issue. I know that there's a lot of technicalities to this. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Varela to ask his question now, because he's had his hand raised for a little bit.
Thanks, Brandon, and thank you to the presenters. This is very informative. I guess maybe just piggybacking on all of what Jessica and Brandon just said, I feel like a missing piece of the conversation is when I think of the mantra of battling climate, you know, sort of the things that my kids repeat to me about reuse, reduce, and recycle. Reduction is really missing, right? I think there are many ways to spin energy. I don't mean politically spin, I mean to try and harness energy. But in the long run, those things too will then be, you know, we're going to have to find a way to sort of, when we realize that lithium batteries and electrical stations also take up a lot of energy, and suddenly the thing that was the answer to battling the gas guzzling car is also too big of a footprint. So reduction, I think, ultimately is going to be the answer, right? We just need to turn off the lights, and we need to have fewer cars on the road. And it doesn't matter if they're electric or gas guzzling. I mean, it does, right? If you're trying to show a distance, but if we go to 2050, at that point, we're going to say, okay, now they're all electric, and we need to cut half of them, right? And so, because the production of those cars is an issue, and keeping up with the roads. Anyway, I'm belaboring the point, but as ultimately as a business, to promote less use of your product, I can see as a contradiction. And so, what sort of conversations do you have around that? And the emails, which I find really informative, that I get from National Grid and ConEd around how to be more energy efficient, I really appreciate, actually. And we talk about them in my co-op and stuff. But I also wish that, you know, some parts of New York City would go dark at night, right? Because when I think of those hundreds of offices with their lights on, and you know, they just need to go off at some point, or we need to find ways to encourage people to stop using utilities when they don't need to. And I think of the conversations that are happening and the programs that are sort of a few steps ahead of us out of necessity in California, people telling me that they have these kind of market deals with their utility companies where their refrigerators go off for a little bit of time because it turns out you don't need them on for 24 hours. You know, everything can stay okay. And so they trade a few hours here, and then they get a break on their bill. Anyway, so I'm just wondering about those conversations. And thank you.
Yeah, Alejandro, great question. So let me first address your first one. You mentioned that energy efficiency and the revenue model of the utilities is a contradiction. Actually, they're not. We, all of us in New York, most utilities in the Northeast and the West Coast are decoupled. What that means, actually, our revenue is not a function of how much electricity and gas you use. And that's why actually utilities are promoting energy efficiency. So think of it as, you basically pay a fixed cost to maintain the network, whether it's electricity and gas, right? So I wanted to, because it's a really good, important point you raised, right? And why would utilities advocate for energy efficiency if it actually impacts their revenue? And it doesn't. So we are completely actually aligned now. We have gone through that transformation where our rates are decoupled. And second, remember I talked about, we are looking at it as a climate emergency now, right? As a company, everything we're talking about, let's put 2050 aside. We are we are busier than ever. And we, not just National Grid, every utility I know, to really, pick up the momentum of decarbonization. And the lowest hanging fruit is energy efficiency, right? And that's why, remember I mentioned the study that we did with the mayor's office and ConEdison. We conducted a 2-year analysis to look at this temporally over time. What do you do now? And then what do you do, like I said, every 5-10 years? And what you alluded to is the highest priority for now, which is energy efficiency, which is, how do you use less? Because that is actually the most effective way to reduce emission. And it also has the lowest cost. I'll stop there, but at some point, we can do a deeper dive on this. And Renee, if you can post it, and I'll do it as well. I'm just listening to you guys, so I'm not looking at the chat. I will post the New York City carbon neutrality study pathway analysis, and we get into this at sort of more detailed because we did analyze and model it. But good question, Alejandro.
Thank you.
And as people I think are raising their hands, I can't see them. New York is leading in sort of energy efficiency, New York, Massachusetts, and California. And we, National Grid, I'm pretty comfortable speculating we have the most progressive and aggressive demand side management to reduce natural gas consumptions. Some of those programs already exist, but some of them will be launched over the next couple of years, because we just concluded a rate case in downstate just a few weeks ago that will allow us to launch new demand side management programs and incentives to reduce consumption of gas.
Okay, thanks, Don. I saw Mr. Harrison has his hand up and he hasn't introduced himself yet this evening. Mr. Harrison, feel free to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Brandon. John Harrison, member of the committee, former chair, former vice chair. I heard mention of our colleague who was just speaking now of the phrase decarbonization, which is an interesting one, and it shows my lack of understanding of some things in the field. So I was wondering what that translated to. In addition, there was some discussion by the mayor's office in the last week during his daily briefings, mostly COVID related, but he brings in other topics, where he posed another time frame in which it is the goal of the city that there's zero consumption of fossil fuels by buildings, which now this goes back actually more than a couple weeks ago, because I had to have our system here at my house inspected, an annual tune-up, and I posed it to the technician who was out, because I'm on National Grid system, so to speak. I'm their customer. We get gas. We don't have oil, and yet the whole thrust of what the mayor is trying to get us towards is to have no fossil fuel usage in residences, because again, what Alejandro said, what Jessica has said, what you've said, Mr. Chair, we're talking about consumption, but I've heard Alejandro mention electricity and cars. It was also posed something which I heard many times in the past, but quite recently, and probably at one of the mayor's briefings, that the biggest consumption of fossil fuel, the biggest cause of fossil fuel emissions in the city of New York are residences. And unless I'm mistaken, I'm sure our colleague or colleagues at National Grid,
buildings in general, for what it's
could
worth.
tell the truth, is that the bulk of that is in natural gas at this point and not in fuel oil. So I'm a little perplexed that the mayor's goal is stated most recently in the last month in his briefings, because we have many buildings, whether they're single, two-family, up to 4, or multiple dwellings.
Mr. Harrison, can I just ask you to ask your question clearly, because I'm trying to capture it.
I've been waiting patiently. Thank you so much, this Thurston. Please be quiet. I'm wondering what National Grid is doing towards this. It's not really a zero sum, but it's really to completely come off the grid. That is the goal of the mayor's office, and it seems somewhat unrealistic, considering that the majority of the residences of this city, whether they're owned or rented, operate on some kind of a fossil fuel burning system.
Great. All right. So John, let me address your first question. You said, what does the term decarbonization mean? It basically means you reduce the CO2 out of the energy use that you use, right? So it might be a technical term, but it basically says renewables, right? Whatever you use that energy for, whether you drive, you heat, you use electricity, it doesn't have a carbon footprint. So decarbonization means you have removed it. So now let me address your second question. Spending all my time in thinking about climate change with all of our engineers, I think the part that we try to stress to the community is how challenging and technical this will be, right? It's a transition. And to give you a sense, when we looked at the city of New York in our study, right? New York City has a nice round number of buildings. It has 1 million buildings, right? And when we looked at the electrification rate of those buildings at 2050, our study concluded, we looked at 3 pathways. It basically said 30 to 60% of the buildings in New York City will use electricity to heat, right? So somewhere between 300,000 to 600,000 buildings in 2050 will be electrifying heat, right? That was sort of a practical range of what the electrification would be. That also means 40% to 70% of the buildings in New York City will not be using electricity to heat their homes. And there is a very, complicated technical answer to this. Why? It has to do with age of the building, how tall it is, when was it constructed, right? You can imagine a brownstone that was built in the 1700s is very different than like a 20-story building, right? And this is what I will come back to. It's that nuance, right? And this is where, from a utility, we try to bring that technical perspective, right, in a conversation with you. So it's not one or the other, John. It's not like binary. Do we electrify or do we use molecules? We'll need them all, right? So when you talk about fossil fuels, yeah, we are transitioning off them. We are transitioning off them on the electricity side, right? Because today electricity is generated from natural gas. We're going to shift to 100% renewables. But it's also not that you will be able to do full electrification, right? You will not be electrified the entire city. It will be somewhere between to that 30 to 60% range that I mentioned. And then for the other people, you have to bring these low carbon fuels that we can dig into. But as you know, I can dig into them if you like, but we highlight them in the study. And then you need additional technologies like geothermal. And our study concluded, even when you do all that, meaning energy efficiency, and by the way, our study concluded that 90% of the buildings in New York City, that's 900,000, will need some sort of an energy efficiency measure. And then you have to get to 100% decarbonized electricity. And then you also have to integrate these low carbon fuels. And we would still fall short of net zero, which means then you have to start integrating solutions that are not even on the books yet, but people are doing them. Universities, actually our own universities in New York, Stony Brook, Columbia, NYU are looking at technology known as carbon capture, which basically means whatever is the remaining CO2 emissions that you have at some point, let's say beyond 2040s, you need to utilize those technology and to integrate them. So I hope that was helpful. And what I'll come back to is this conversation is incredibly technical and nuanced. And I'm delighted to work with you as the community to go through that detail, because it is not a simplistic answer. People say, can I electrify my building? And then the answer is, well, you tell me how, what building you're living in. How old is it? How tall is it? And I sort of sometimes when I give that answer, people think like, I'm sort of aggravating them. And I have to say, look, because the answer is a function of your building, right? Somebody was telling me that, they're not in New York City, they're in Long Island, right? They want to melt aluminum, right? And I said, well, if you're melting aluminum, you're not going to electrify that. And I tried to, talk about, what the solution would be, which would be, hydrogen, right? You're going to transition from natural gas, how you melt aluminum today, to hydrogen, and that will be decarbonized, meaning it won't have CO2 emissions. So you ask a, really good, detailed, complicated question. I hope I was clear, but again, I'm more than happy to come back and take you through it in more detail. Again, I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Don.
It was very helpful.
Appreciate John. I'm going to take control for 1 second here. Thank you. Everyone, I just want to remind you for 1 second, I gave an advisory at the beginning of the meeting. Everyone in this meeting is expected to speak to everyone else in this meeting respectfully, period. That doesn't matter if you're a committee member, a member of the public, presenter, anyone. Please, everyone, follow that guidance. That I don't know if anyone missed the beginning part of the meeting where I mentioned that, but that's the way that we run this meeting and this committee, and it's my expectation of everybody, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with what anyone else is saying. I want to move on because we're over 25 minutes on this subject already, and see if anyone else on the committee who hasn't spoken already has a comment. And I'll go on and ask the members of the public after that point. Are there any other committee members or board members with a question for National Grid?
John Dew has a very brief question.
Mr. Dew, floor is yours.
Brandon, the Clinton Hill Apartment Owners Corporation, there are buildings on Clinton Avenue that were part of the Navy Yard housing. We converted 7 of those buildings to cogeneration about 15 or so years ago. And those 7 buildings produce their own electricity. I sent you the article. I just sent it to you, and I sent it to a couple of other folks whose email. But I wanted to know whether that project, which was a demonstration project that NYSERDA funded to determine if that could be widespreadly done throughout, because it saved hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil burning, because we now produce our own electricity, and the excess electricity is pumped back into the ConEd grid. Has that been explored any further than our demonstration project 15 years ago?
Hey, John, was it a question for me, which I can talk to, or was that a question for Brandon?
It was a question for you because ConEd was involved in this particular project because they had to agree to accept the excess electricity that the cogeneration units produced that the apartments did not use.
So another really great question, right? Cogeneration is extremely efficient, right? Because you're able to use excess heat, you generate your own power. Now, here's what I have to tell you. There are parts of the country that are really actually incentivizing cogeneration. However, at this point, New York State, and from what I see, is actually moving away from cogeneration because they are, they're sort of, well, they're thinking that if you stay with cogeneration, all you're doing is you're increasing your reliance on natural gas, because that cogeneration plant is running on natural gas. And from my perspective, this is just my perspective, that's really unfortunate, because cogeneration plants are the most efficient plants that you can think of, because they use all of the waste heat, to provide hot water.
That is correct.
Yeah, and the part that we are trying to actually talk to our regulators here in New York is, you really need to think about cogeneration as part of your long-term solution, because you can decarbonize. Again, this is, in other words, replace what fuels those cogenerations from natural gas to renewable natural gas and hydrogen. So I hope the state moves towards that direction. However, at this point right now, it seems that New York and Massachusetts are the 2 states are actually looking at removing cogeneration as one of the tools into the future. I hope they change their mind, but because they're not convinced that you can decarbonize the gas network. But that's sort of the status quo today. And it comes back to, the nuance I mentioned. It depends on your building and all of that. And you actually highlighted a really great solution, cogeneration, and how you think about cogeneration.
Thank you for that.
And Justin, just to highlight on that, I was involved at my former position at National Grid going back with that project on the gas side. So I was very happy with that project. And in the past, I guess, 10 years, there are some new construction projects that are in, like Fulton Street down in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Crown Heights, all affordable housing. There are some cogeneration still popping up. But again, it's not as much as I think everyone should be more involved with.
Thanks.
Again, thank you.
And thanks, Mr. Yu, for your question. Any other members of the board or the public who have a question for National Grid? Trying to keep my eyes out and scroll through everyone.
Brandon, while you're screening, do we have any illegal gas hookups in our district that have ever been discovered?
Ms. Church, would you know the answer to that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Thanks. I don't see anyone else with a question. I think I would just leave, and I do want to just ask Dennis one question. Dennis, are you still with us?
Sure, I am. Yes.
Thanks. I appreciate you giving us a really thorough explanation of why the Colonial Pipeline issue could not happen with National Grid. But I think, can I just ask from a different perspective, and keep in mind that we're lay people, none of us here are cybersecurity experts, but I really appreciate you giving us the insight that you have about your company's policies in this regard and approach. What would you say to someone who lives in our district who is just concerned about there being a different issue than Colonial Pipeline, basically from a cybersecurity perspective, maybe generally about your policies that sort of goes to what should give us comfort that something like that won't happen to us, even if it doesn't happen the same way and doesn't relate to two-factor authentication?
Sure. And I'm mindful, cybersecurity is something where you always want to retain a degree of humility, right? Because the people who are coming after you are quite intelligent and quite capable. What I would say is that speaking for National Grid, that we take nothing for granted, and nothing I said earlier would be meant to suggest that we think we've licked the problem, so to speak, and that we have such and such controls, and therefore everything is going to be fine. I'm saying this in support of the answer to your question, which is, it's this constant state of questioning and almost paranoia, but continuous testing of those controls. It's not enough to say you have multi-factor authentication, but you must constantly be searching out, is that true? Have you missed something? So on the one hand, I would say we spend a lot of time with exercises, not just scanning ourselves, but with exercises in what's called red teaming. In other words, either attacking ourselves or paying people to attack us to test our assumptions and test our controls. And so that's maybe one big point that I would make in answer to your question, which is, we put these controls in place, but we don't simply assume that they're working, and we are constantly attacking ourselves to make sure that that's true. So that's maybe point number one. Point number two, I alluded briefly to the analysis that Homeland Security did, and again, I don't mean to suggest that this is static or anything like that, but the broad conclusion of that is that, while any company, there's always improvements. The enemy is always adapting. You always need to adapt. But the broad conclusion of that analysis was that National Grid is very mature relative to its peers in the utility industry. So I'd couple those two things. I'd say we have some objective evidence that we are on the high end of the maturity spectrum, and say that we never rest on our laurels. We're constantly testing those assumptions. But the public is very right to be questioning these issues. It's a very serious issue.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. We have one more question from Ms. Einhorn.
Okay.
Hey, so I think from the community standpoint, it's interesting that we're kind of targeting cybersecurity, because I think whether it's an outage due to a man-made or natural hazard, the impacts to the city are going to be the same. And I'm wondering if maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about how the community board can speak to the community about individual preparedness, how we can be highlighting, how we can communicate with National Grid and our other providers to make sure that we're getting the most up-to-date information out there and strengthening the resilience of our community from that perspective.
And I want to be, was that directed to anybody in particular?
Well, did you have any?
I just wanted to open
that,
the.
Dennis?
floor. Yeah.
I'm sorry, say again, Brendan.
No, go ahead, Lindsay. I want to be true to the spirit of your comment.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I think all of the providers should feel free to speak up. And just so you know, I do work for New York City Emergency Management. I am working on some cybersecurity work for the city right now, but I think sometimes we get bogged down in the details of how the companies are preparing. And I think individual preparedness is incredibly important, especially when you look at some of the stats about how people feel like the city is going to come and save them from the impacts of whether it's a cybersecurity incident or a natural disaster, when in reality, the resources just don't exist to do that. And we have to take some individual responsibility to be prepared for these types of events.
Yeah, and I would say, of course, I'm very focused on the company side of that, and sort of building back from scratch if the worst case scenario happens. But we do have some people who can speak very well to emergency response, and particularly the public engagement aspect of it. And I think it's probably a good topic for a future forum where somebody who's more on that side of it could probably have a better conversation about it. Renee, did you want to add anything? Sorry.
Go ahead, Renee.
We will bring that. That was one of the other questions that our team from emergency planning was unable to join, but we'll look to, have that team come back again, talk about that portion of it. Absolutely. And I just want to say from as an employee, the security that we have to go through to get to our systems on a regular basis is very intense. So,
So maybe just as an anecdote, we all had trouble joining the Zoom meeting tonight because our security is so tight that we don't really allow Zoom. So if that's a minor example.
Right.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, let me just say on behalf of the committee and the board, thank you all for coming and making your presentation tonight. I greatly appreciated your points, even about the local law. I really appreciated that as well too. I want to say on the cybersecurity point, I felt you hit my questions and I appreciated where we were going. On the climate change point, I feel like there really is no way that any company can be as engaged as they need to be. I still kind of feel like National Grid could potentially be a little bit more engaged on climate change and doing it a little more proactively, just because this is an emergency. So I will really look forward to the follow-up that we have with you on that subject. Separately on disaster recovery, I'll look forward to hearing where we go with that. And I'm really grateful for all of your individual time coming and speaking about this point. And we'll look forward to hearing about. I really want to get the details followed up on those 2020 items that I shared the link about. So if you can share that with the board office, that would be wonderful. But for you individually, thank you very much for your time coming and speaking with us and sharing your perspectives on your different subject matter areas. We're going to move on to the next item in the agenda.
Thank you, Brandon, for the opportunity. I think most of us may be jumping off the call, but if there's anything else you need from us, please let us know.
Well, the 2020 priority answers, I would like to know that information, but we'll be in touch about the rest. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and have a good evening.
All right, thank you. All right, everyone. The next item on the agenda tonight is the presentation from ConEdison. Do we have Mr. Terrence Kelly on the line?
Brandon, hi, good evening. Terrence Kelly from Brooklyn Corporate Affairs and ConEdison.
Thank you for joining us. And are you the only one here for ConEdison tonight?
I am. I'm representing ConEd solo.
Great.
We typically run deep like National Grid, but I'm happy to present and cover topics and certainly respond back with any more detailed, responses to inquiries.
Okay.
Would you mind if I shared screen, or is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just keep in mind, we have 15 minutes allotted to this section, and
we're gonna run. Don't worry. I don't want to. I think that it's was actually great to have Renee, who's one of my colleagues, who we often run in the same circles. They covered a lot of great points, and a lot of I think it's very consistent with some of our answers too. So I just wanted to thank everyone for having us tonight. So my name is Terrence Kelly. I work as manager in corporate affairs for ConEdison. I'm a longtime. I was a longtime resident of Clinton Hill in Francine Towers on Washington Avenue. Our offices are at 30 Flatbush. So CB2 is heart and home, and hopefully, God willing, someday I can return back as a resident. But I just wanted to share these slides, just go through a couple of things. Cybersecurity, I think we can touch quickly. Clean energy, climate change, the local law impacts, and then the energy efficiency EV, smart meters, and some resources and outreach, because this is also a social services committee. Figured it might be important. So just a quick overview, if that's all right, and we'll run quick, I promise. So this is just a quick electric operations overview of energy generation, which we do not generate power in the state of New York, just for everyone's reference. We do not own. We handle transmission and distribution of electric commodity in Brooklyn. We also have the largest district steam system in the United States, which serves Manhattan. And we also do have gas commodities in Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx. And we wanted to just show a quick, slide of what it really means. It comes from generation through transmission to the electric distribution system. So in New York, we have about 3.3 million electric customers. About 86% of it is underground network and 14% is overhead. About 265,000 underground structures, 270,000 overhead utility poles. In Brooklyn, we have just under 1 million electric customers, and 92% of that is fed by the underground. In CB2, we have roughly 51,000 electric customers. 80% of those are residential, 20% commercial, fed by 2 substations and into 2 networks. And what I think is important is to know is, certainly in downtown Brooklyn, some of our largest customers in the borough are in Community Board 2. And also Community Board 2 is does house the Plymouth Street substation, the Water Street substation, and the Farragut complex, which moves electric power from the transmission system into the local electric distribution system. So that's the big complex you see when you're going over the train on Williamsburg or on the Q train over the Manhattan Bridge. So from a clean energy commitment standpoint, we're tripling energy efficiency by 2030. We are of 100% clean electricity by 2040, and we're all in support for electric vehicles. These are the talking points we can certainly we can go through in the Q&A as well, because I can get deeper on that, but I just wanted to touch on them. We do have a climate change implementation plan that was born out of in 2020, was born out of a 2019 study that was concluded, showing that there were certain vulnerabilities and certain areas where we need to rightfully acknowledge the climate emergency and to put into practice what it really means to run a regulated utility in New York City in the threat of the climate crisis ahead of us. So we want to also review that as well. We think local law impacts are also a very important topic, and we certainly want to work with the city agencies involved. But Local Law 97 really comes to mind as something of one of the most important and progressive changes to local law when it comes to energy use and consumption in recent memory. And we certainly want to be part of the solution when it comes to that. So finally, just going through quickly, energy efficiency is one of the biggest, and most important factors in our effort to reduce overall energy consumption and to make the grid more reliable as well. What we're going to be spending $1.5 billion by 2030 to increase program participation. But so far, 1 million ConEdison customers have already made equipment upgrades. And To translate that, that's more than 7 million metric ton reduction in carbon emissions as a result, roughly the result of taking 1 million cars off the road with regular use. Going through quickly, apologies if this is, I don't mean to talk too fast, but demand management, also, it's a runaway success. When we worked in, in forecasting, we worked in the neighborhoods of Fort Greene and Clinton Hill to work with residential, multifamily, and commercial customers on free lighting upgrades and heavily subsidized and incentivized equipment upgrades. I put Falafel House and Myrtle Avenue down there just as an example of one small business that we helped when they came to us with a high bill issue, and we're able to come in there and help them with an investment of almost a realization of $2,800 in cost savings and equipment upgrades immediately. So energy storage is also part of the solution. We believe battery storage across the board is an enormous part of the fabric of resiliency, and we think that coupled with demand response will ultimately prove to be a way to reduce overall consumption, decarbonize, and to create better reliability and resiliency in the climate crisis. Electric vehicles, you're going to see a lot more about this. Brandon, would you mind if I could just continue and I'll move fast?
That's fine.
Hello?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. It took me a second to unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, all good. I just figured these are things that, DOT will certainly cover in their own right. And we believe that it's such an incredible program, but, it's going to be more and more. You're going to see lots of chargers everywhere. We think smart meters are also part of the grid modernization and the grid investments. To date, we're hit roughly 99% of AMI installation in Brooklyn. These meters help to truly take electricity off the analog and into the digital age. And we want to make sure that people know that there's no charge for meter installs. We've heard about scams. We know that our licensed contractors from La Clara and Southern Cross are still doing installs on a day-to-day basis. So if you do have any concerns about that, and small businesses do, and some of our customers certainly don't want to answer the door for strangers, I can't blame them, please reach out to us. You can always call 1-800-752-6633. That's 1-800-75-ConEd. I will also drop that in the chat and provide that again at the end. There's new communications and energy reports available through smart meter deployment. You're getting your meter read every 15 minutes instead of a estimated bill read once every 30 days. So the enormous amount of data that's being shared and encrypted and analyzed and measured, evaluated is incredible. And it also allows us to implement both low and moderate income programs, programs for our older adults over 62 and customers with disabilities or life support equipment. And then it also allows us to implement smart energy plans where we can look at dynamic pricing based on time of day and other pilots throughout the borough as well. So we're really excited at what it unlocks in terms of getting the grid to be more resilient and more reliable. Conservation voltage optimization is one of these tools. It's where we're able to truly look at where the meter hits the grid. It lowers bills, it saves ratepayers money. There's environmental benefits to optimizing the amount of electricity serving a customer. Sometimes it was a dumb grid since Thomas Edison introduced the lighting company on Pearl Street. And now we have the opportunity to take this and to enhance and accelerate all the opportunities of the 21st century customer experience that people frankly demand. They want better customer service, they want more reliable electricity, and they want to understand what they're paying for on a much more robust basis. Customer resources and outreach. We also think, it is very important to know that, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we have the outage map, and during power, you can always report power problems through the ConEdison website, through your account, through the app, or calling us. where, there's no wrong point of entry. You can walk through go through the outage map is updated every 15 minutes based on, the same cadence as the smart meters. So we do try to encourage people to report problems this way. During Hurricane Ida and other recent events where we were getting close to, through text messages and online use, about 90% of all outages are now being reported through the internet and through text messaging, which is a pretty incredible number. So we're excited to continue to build on that program. We want these energy reports to help people to make informed decisions, both from an energy efficiency and from a financial perspective. So we really do want people to get help when they need it, when it comes to COVID, when it comes to understanding what their eligibility is for HEAP and other income eligible programs. And then finally, we only have about 39 registered LSE life support equipment customers in Community Board 2 right now. That means if you have a requirement to have electric service, it puts you in an enhanced communication class of customer where we work with you extremely close in terms of what we intend to do during electric emergencies, during weather events. We certainly want to make sure that everyone is being looked after, and we coordinate with fire, police, and emergency management on these efforts on a regular basis as well. We try every single asset available to communicate with the customers. And as mentioned earlier, we send out a ton of emails, we send out tons of texts and phones and everything, and our social media. And so if there's anything we can do to help to provide a more, or to enhance our communication, please let us know. I knew that National Grid would be coming in with an extremely detail-oriented response tonight, and I wanted to afford them the time and opportunity to talk. So if there is anything specific to Community Board 2 that we can really dive into, I'm happy to take Q&A to that level. The other thing, I'll just find my final point. There's a lot of incredible people on this, not to blow smoke, but there's a lot of incredible people who add their time and, and voice to these from their work experiences, from, working with agencies and the government and community. CB2 is pretty, vocal and in tune. If there's anything we can do to drill down in email responses and to get a better follow-up that I can't provide tonight, I'm more than happy to do that, because we certainly, as a professional courtesy, want to provide these answers, and we don't want to take up too much more of your time. But I'm going to drop all my contact info in the chat, including my work cell, and please don't be afraid to use it. Just don't let me know that the power is out every 14 minutes if something happens. I really appreciate your time and consideration. Carol Ann, Brandon, thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and thank you for waiting through into the second hour of our meeting to give your presentation. I mean, I'll give the same prefix that I gave to the folks at National Grid, which is that, I would hope that you'll address the questions from the committee with an understanding that at least my feeling is this needs to be treated as an emergency and not as something that is really, goals, fiscal year 2023, 2025, or, some future time, steps that are being taken as Greta Thunberg would say, blah, blah, blah. We need to get we need to understand urgency and what's being done, and appreciate some elements of your presentation that hinted at that. But I want to open it to members of the committee that have a question for Mr. Kelly about ConEdison and your presentation. Does anyone on the committee have a question for Mr. Kelly?
One quick question. Mr. Kelly mentioned that in our district, there was only, I forget the number he said, but a small number of people that had signed up to be on the higher priority in terms of just any electrical needs or challenges. What was that stat? Sorry.
Yeah, Emily, we call it life support equipment registration.
Okay.
And it's more than just enhanced, I have a dial, like, you really it's significant medical equipment. There's only 39 people in the entire district, and knowing that there is a significant population of older adults, and there are a lot of naturally occurring retirement communities. We just want to make sure that people are aware of that number, and we want to boost it. So it doesn't give you priority in terms of you don't get to jump the line if your power is out immediately. But what it does is we make every effort to enhance the communication prior to a weather event, or also to a planned work, or in a weather, or an emergency, so that you can make we're required by our regulators and by the city to touch base with LSE customers during certain power outages over certain periods of time. I believe it's 2 calls, and we have to make contact with the customer. If not, it's referred to the police department for a wellness check immediately. So what it does is it just makes sure that we are not leaving any of the most vulnerable customers behind when it comes to weather emergencies or electric emergencies. But it's a very low number, and I want to get it up. If there's 51,000 people in the that's what I'm trying to get at.
Thank you. And I know we're way over time, so I'll just say for the HESS committee that we can think about, I know we've had some directors of some of the senior citizen centers in our district that have come to speak to us, so we can maybe just follow up with them to make sure they're aware of the program. But thank you so much, Terrence.
Thank you, Terrence. And just before I take other questions, you did hear Dennis's presentation, right, on the cybersecurity plans at National Grid. Is there anything you can say about cybersecurity at Con Ed, or how we as community members could feel comfortable not knowing that there's going to be any sort of issue that comes upon our community in that regard?
Well, I think, I mean, quite frankly and quite honestly, Dennis hit the nail on the head. I think that there's industry standards that are best in class as well. And when it comes to the regulated utilities in downstate New York, ConEdison and National Grid have extremely consistent and very high levels of information security, cybersecurity, and physical security. A lot of it has to do with just having to service the greatest city in the world, and having the most high profile, management. We often refer to it as the fourth commodity. Private personal identifiable information, PII, is often referred to as the fourth commodity in addition to electric, gas, and steam, because it is so valuable, and it is so important to make sure that we protect our customers' information, considering who we are servicing and how important it is. But he did make great points that I think I would not want to be redundant. And I don't think that there's anything further I can add to. The 2-step verification obviously is such an incredible point. The isolation and segregation of certain critical facilities, and the inability to go in remote without certain verifications is all consistent with what ConEdison does as well.
That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any other questions from any board members or members of the public for Mr. Kelly?
And you can drop an email one more time. I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Of course, Ms. Einhorn.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of how to sign up to be on the LSE list. And so my understanding is that you can sign up through your doctor's office, but that there's also a registration flyer that you might have that you might be able to drop into the chat.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, this is John Dew. I just want to say that in my almost quarter century on the community board, this is the most relevant and important presentation I have gotten. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. In light of the agenda, and we've made it a little over 15 for this presentation, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, and I remain optimistic that we can make it through this evening. I'm not sure if I have the most updated agenda, but we're going to commence our liquor license review for the evening. The first item I asked to be moved to the top of the liquor license review was 275 Park Avenue. I'll give you a bit of a backstory on 275 Park Avenue. And by the way, we're allotting 10 minutes for this item. 275 Park Avenue was came to us in June with an application for a comedy venue, 275 Park Performances LLC, with a 30-day notice, which we heard at our June committee meeting. At that meeting, we also heard from a resident, Mr. Townsend, who I think is back with us tonight, and we approved this liquor license with 4 conditions. Our committee voted to approve with the condition that the applicant will close their establishment between 12 a.m. on Sunday to Thursday nights, 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. The applicant will have a meeting seeking community feedback, incorporating residents of the building and members of the local community, and provide the date of the meeting to the community board. That was because at the time of that meeting, there was some debate about the degree to which the members of the building had actually known about the proposed liquor license at 275 Park Avenue for the comedy show. The applicant did post, but there was a discussion about how the applicant had contacted a person from Fairstead, the owner of the building, and that person had represented that there had been some conversations with the community. And the community member present, Mr. Townsend, indicated that he had not been contacted and that he felt like others in the building had not been contacted. And we've received similar feedback from other folks in the building. And in addition to a letter expressing opposition to the liquor license after that meeting. The third condition was that the applicant will come back in September 2021, having met with the community to report back on how things are going. And the fourth condition was that the applicant will add additional security staff for a total of 5 security staff at the location. So the purpose of today's meeting, a little bit down the road, because this item was approved, subsequently approved by the executive committee, sent off to the State Liquor Authority with those conditions, and subsequently marked to come back. And the reason it didn't appear at the September meeting is because with the limited technology we had at that meeting, and I want to apologize to the folks in the community who came and couldn't communicate with us at that meeting beyond just watching the broadcast. We felt like this would be a better forum where we can actually engage a little bit more and actually have feedback where pertinent. So I think how I'd like to structure this is, do we have Mr. Clark and Mr. Dijon here? I see you guys, and I recall you were back at the last meeting. I'd like to follow up with you first to see what the update was regarding any meetings held with the folks in the community. What was the feedback that, as you took it from the meetings with the community, and what, if any, plans do you have moving forward? I think I visited this location to try to get an understanding of what the status was. It doesn't seem like it's open yet, but hopefully you can provide some light on that. Mr. Clark and Mr. Dijon, feel free to take it away and give your update. And just keep in mind, we're trying to keep this whole discussion into 10 minutes, so try to keep it somewhat brief.
Kwame, you want to start with the dates and stuff with the meetings?
Sure. So we had 2 Zoom meetings, July 6th and July 22nd. Both of those were pushed back in order to receive more people. We had a couple other meetings that were scheduled, but they didn't have enough feedback from, we didn't have enough RSVPs, so the management thought it was best to push them back. So we pushed them back in order to get larger numbers to attend. So we had 2, and we also intend to have more moving forward. In terms of the time, we made the change on the time for midnight and 2 a.m. And with the security change as well.
In terms of the meetings, how many people attended, and what was the what did you feel was the viewpoint of the people at the meeting as they expressed it to you?
The first meeting, if I recall, there was probably I think a total of about 17 or 19 people, but that included ourselves. It included members from management from the building. So probably residents, if I have to make a guess, maybe around 13 or 14 residents. The second meeting was not much different. I think it was actually maybe a little bit less than the first. And that's despite, postponing them in order to get a greater number. I think the first one we postponed twice in order to get a greater number of residents. And that's what we received. In terms of what the feedback, it was mixed. There was some people who reached out to us after the meeting via email, and we had some email correspondence that was pretty good. There were also some of the people in the community who emailed us and that we've had conversations with following up. That so mixed. There was quite a number of people who were against what we're trying to do and or had a different idea of what it is that we're trying to do versus what we're actually doing. We have a lot of comparisons to nightclubs and that type of thing, which we're not. Which we tried to make very clear that we're not a nightclub or anything like that.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I really want to emphasize. We're a sit-down venue, restaurant, bar, entertainment, live music, stand-up comedians, professional comedians, not any, well, we're gonna have local acts, but we're gonna be doing a lot of major acts. Comedians like Bill Burr, Andrew Schultz, Bill Bellamy, Kevin Hart. These are all associates of mine. And I've been in this business for 30 years. And so it's a high end. We're being compared to a lot of nightclubs that house a younger audience, 18 to 25 or whatever that is. And yes, there might have been incidents. Yes, there might have been police interaction. And I don't compare that to what I've been doing. And even if the building wanted references from me, because I've been at places for 15 years consistently, where I've never even had an argument or a fight in some of the worst parts of Brooklyn, including East New York at Lindenwood Diner. I've been there 17 years straight doing comedy shows there twice a week. And I've never, ever even had an argument. So if it's, in comparing it, I don't think it's fair to compare us to other venues because those things have happened in the past. I think that we deserve a fair opportunity to show the type of professionalism that we're going to bring to the venue and to the area.
I just want to say one last thing. We also invited everyone to come to the shows that we currently do. That offer is still open. We do shows every Tuesday at LBC Mall.
We're City Point at the Cow Market, downtown Brooklyn.
We've opened it up. We said we give them free comp tickets to come check out exactly what it is we do if they want to get an idea of what our shows are like, what our audience is like. So that offer is still open. If anyone would like, if any of you would like to come, just let us know.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. I'll allow the committee members first to talk about that, and then we can have a brief moment to allow some community feedback on this too. But I want to note that we did receive a letter from the members of the community and the 275 Park Avenue building, indicating that they had over 200 signatures from members of the community about concerns. While the concerns expressed in this letter relate to nightlife venues in the neighborhood, previous and current, which it would not be your venue, but other venues that have had violence and the things that we've spoken about, lewd behavior, traffic accidents, excessive noise. There was some concerns about how that are referenced in the letter about how you all answered questions at the last committee meeting in terms of whether or not you had an agreement with the 275 with the Brooklyn Navy Yard shuttle in terms of
Can I
back and
can I
forth.
res-
Well, if you can just let me summarize the letter
Okay.
really quick, I want to make sure that I hit the pertinent aspects of this letter and make sure that you're aware, and then I'd like to hear your response to it for sure. There's contact with someone from the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and apparently they didn't feel like there had been any such discussions. There was also there's a concern about parking being at capacity in the neighborhood. There's a concern about how with so many people living in the neighborhood and there being children who live in the neighborhood, a large capacity nightlife venue is not the best option to have in the neighborhood. There is a concern about the disruption of daily lives. People who want the neighborhood to remain quiet, clean, and safe. There's a concern about there's a concern about there are many other concerns of people who generally feel they don't want to be treated as sacrificial lambs, that they are opposed to the venue. They're troubled by misrepresentations by the proprietors due to their presentation here, and that pretty much summarizes each of the concerns: parking problems, traffic, and noise. I get the understanding from this that there are quite a number of people who are concerned about this. Now, regardless of whether or not you agree with their concerns, I think, you have to understand that there are people who this is their home in and around your venue. And we need to have steps taken to ensure that that their lives are disrupted as minimally as possible in connection with your operation of the venue there. And if you're talking even what we agreed to, 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. on the weekends, the security staff, what can you say if the question is generally about what will you do to prevent noise, to prevent impact in your in the neighborhood? What is your response to that point?
So we agreed in the initial meeting that we would increase the amount of security personnel, and a good portion of the security personnel, upon the patrons leaving a show, they would, be outside and directing people that they can't stand around. They have to go to their vehicles and they have to leave the area. There's no loitering. So we would have the extra security outside to direct that traffic. So there is no lingering and just hanging around in the area. I am familiar with a bunch of different security companies, and the security companies that we want to use, not your typical ninja looking kind of security, but guys that are in suits. There are a lot of retired NYPD, people like that are accustomed to moving the traffic in the streets and stuff like that. So I think in the first meeting, we did agree that we had to increase that security. And then when the people are letting out, they have to go outside and they have to direct that traffic and to prevent the loitering in the area. You mentioned something about the shuttle bus. So I never said that we had an agreement. What I did say, and it is true, that anybody that gets off of the A train on Fulton Street and Washington, they can take that shuttle. They do not ask them for ID. The only time that they ask for ID is when they go through the Brooklyn Navy Yard and they enter the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Anybody can get on the shuttle saying, I'm going towards the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It doesn't call for an agreement. That's number one. Number two, there's a gentleman named Rick Bowens, and if anybody wants to check this, and Janice Hunt. These are my two contacts at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We are scheduled to have meetings around what do we do with the vehicles. Is it, if as long as it's going to be in the evening, we can work out some process for the cars to be parked. Another question came up about the insurance and the liability of the vehicles, and we discussed hiring a valet company that comes with insurance, and they would have, the agreement would be between us and the Brooklyn Navy Yard. They'd be able to park the cars. The people don't even have to walk. They take the cars to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. This is all in a process. We are months away from opening, so it's going to take some negotiating with the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Do we have something etched in stone? No, but it is open for conversation. If anybody wants the phone numbers and the contact names, I can provide you with them, and they will let you know that I've been in communication and discussing how we're going to deal with these vehicles. They even asked me on an average how many cars. I told them, well, on a sold out night, it would be about 75 cars or something like that. And they said that that's definitely feasible as long as it's after 6 p.m.
I got that. Thank you. Can I just ask, between the two of you, who's going to be on site at this location every night that it's open, and who would be the person to contact if there was a community concern about noise?
We will be there every night.
We're both going to be there. I'm going to be in there every day. My office is I'm moving my office from where I am now into the establishment. So I'll be there all day, every day.
Okay.
And just one other thing. If anyone would like to come to one of our shows, they will see what our shows empty out in 10, 15 minutes. There's people leave. They're working people. They have work the next day. They come to our show's over, they're out of there. They don't hang out. You know, I'm gone in, 30 minutes after a show is over, and after doing everything I need to do. So it's not the type of thing where people are hanging out for an hour after a show, and people, you can come and witness it. Every Tuesday we have a show.
And you indicated you're going to have further meetings with the members of the building. When will the next meeting be?
We haven't scheduled it. So we work with the management team as to when we want to host them. We're in the process now of doing our permitting for construction and that type of thing. So we have some time. So, and even after we open, we're open to do in-person meetings in the venue. Our first meeting was originally supposed to be on the rooftop of the building, and then it was changed to a Zoom. So, this is not something that we want to just kind of check off a box. We said that we want this to be an ongoing conversation with the residents.
Okay, thank you. Does any member of the committee have any comment or question before we move on and solicit some community feedback on this? Ms. Cobb? Sorry, we didn't recognize you earlier. Feel free to introduce yourself. We're happy that you're able to join us this evening.
Yeah, I just have a question. I live in the neighborhood. Where is this shuttle bus? I've never seen one.
Comes down.
Where's the shuttle bus?
It comes down Washington Avenue. It actually says on the front of it, Brooklyn Navy Yard. It comes from Fulton in Washington and goes straight down Washington Avenue.
May I clarify something, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Church.
I just want to mention that bus does not pick up persons who do not work at the Navy Yard. It is an insurance issue for them. So patrons of the comedy club will not be allowed on the bus or should not be on that bus. I don't think that's a practical plan.
I spoke to them today. I had a conversation today just to confirm that. So I have a contact number and a person.
Well, the president and CEO of the Navy Yard addressed the board just last Wednesday, and that was a topic that came up, and those were his exact words that I'm not repeating.
Okay, well, maybe somebody's misleading me, but I did have a conversation with Rick Bowens today, who was also head of security, and the gentleman that runs the shuttle bus sits right across from him. So if I need to have a further discussion with him, then I will.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeJohn, and thank you, Ms. Church. Any other questions from the committee?
I just want to say it's very important that people that you who are doing the club straight up, and when you say something, you mean it, because what happens if there's something that's said and it doesn't prove to be true or correct, it looks bad for the club, and people will have less faith in you running the club, because if in the very beginning things are not straight up, there's questions about what happens at the end, given the fact that we have in the community experienced a lot of problems with clubs. So you need to be sensitive to that. As a resident of the community, you need to be really sensitive to that. That's the comment that I have for you.
Mr. Clark, Mr. DeJohn, can one, do you have any response to Mr. Cobb? And two, when is it that you plan to open?
Well, we don't even have an exact date right now, because we had the architect do the plans. We just submitted for permits. So basically, after all of the permits come back, then having a conversation with the contractor will determine like January or February or something like that. It's not because of COVID, everything is delayed. So, getting responses back from the city is very difficult right now. So we're just going through that process.
And just yesterday, my architect and my acoustic engineer, we're redesigning what the roof looks like in order to get maximum dampening of sound traveling. So we just had a meeting just yesterday. So we're doing like I don't even know how to describe it. These like hangers that attach to the roof, and then there's like a space gap and something like that. But yeah, so it's a process.
Thank you. Mr. Du, you had a question?
Is the community board members, are they comped to go into your club? And I do need to reinforce what Carol Ann Church said. We ask the Brooklyn Navy Yard every year about the use of their buses from downtown Brooklyn to the Navy Yard, and we get the same no, because the insurance doesn't cover it response. So I have
let me just take that from there 1 second. With regard to the Navy Yard, I'll be happy to hear your further comments, John, but our committee does not suggest that anyone from our board be comped to go to this club or any business. So I would appreciate it if we don't address that point. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I apologize, Brandon, but I always look for a free laugh. I'm done.
Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, I have a question, Brandon.
Mr. Newmark.
Thank you. This is a question, not because I want to be comped, because I wouldn't be, to go to the club, but could you clarify, where did you say you're currently operating like this? And if so, Do you know who holds the liquor license for it?
Right now, we're at City Point, in DeKalb Market, downtown Brooklyn. They have their own liquor license. So I'm operating under their umbrella. I pay a fee to be there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. Now, in terms of community members, we have a very limited opportunity for feedback on this. So I'd ask that you try to keep your comments within 2 minutes if possible. I saw that Ms. Cassie had her hand up, and I'll be happy to give you the floor to express your feedback. And if you could just give us your full name first, that would be great. I can't promise we're going to be able to hear from other community members, but particularly I would want you to point out anything I might have missed in my description of the letter, or as well as any reaction to the meeting if you had actually gone to one of the meetings with this applicant.
Sure, thank you. Hi, my name is Cassie Magzamin. I'm a long-term tenant of the building. It's been one misrepresentation after another. You specifically had said that they would need to meet with the community. They never met with the community. They met with residents twice. That's true. It was largely negative feedback that was received. They never reached out to the community, and you stipulated that they needed to do that. That was the first thing. With regard to the letter, I posted a link to a petition that we have put out to the community and have received 230 signatures in strong opposition to this occurring. The Navy Yard conversations, Shani Leibowitz is a senior vice president of transportation, and I copied and cut and pasted her email to us and also posted that in the chat. I'm not sure what Mr. Dijon is referring to, and perhaps it's very recent, but it's one misrepresentation after another. She's the SVP there, and she is adamantly denying that the Navy Yard is going to provide any sort of parking or any sort of transportation. If this is not a nightclub, I just can't imagine why they want to stay open till 2 a.m. And I can't imagine why it's so important that they have a liquor license. We have children, we have families. It's just extremely apparent that we don't want this in our building, and that's all that I'll say, unless you have specific questions for me. And thank you. We very much appreciate you hearing us out.
Thank you. Were there any other folks from the community or the building who wanted to speak on something? I would ask that if anybody else raises something, just for time purposes, you try to hit a point that Cassie did not hit, because we'll speak to the applicant shortly after that.
I have a question.
Ms. Anadu?
Just so I have what is and I'm not sure if you're, and this is a question to Cassie, since it sounds like she put out the petition or the request for signatures. Do you have a general sense of like what the racial makeup is of the building and of the people who signed? Just generally. And it doesn't have to be scientific, but I'm just trying to understand.
Sure, I don't have the stats of the petition based on some of the names. I would say it's diverse, and in terms of our building, it's a fairly diverse community, many families, a few students.
Sorry, just to be more racial, sorry, just in terms of racial diversity, what is the building majority, any particular?
Probably, yeah, I would say the majority is white, but we certainly have people of color in the buildings, Matt, I think, Matt, can you speak to that quickly?
Can I just take
Oh,
the
sure.
reins back of the meeting really quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I try to give the community an element of feedback, but we do have to keep it somewhat orderly. And I want to try to move on from this very quickly because we have a number of other items left on our agenda, and I want to make sure that we hit them all. Was there any other person from within the building or the community who wanted to speak? And then we'll go back to the applicant and have a conclusion of this. Okay, I'm not hearing anything else, and we do note that we have received that letter. To Mr. DeJohn and Mr. Clark, hearing the feedback from the Cassie and knowing that there are so many people in the surrounding community, can you address the concern that the community was not contacted, and what efforts did you make to contact the community in terms of your outreach for the meeting?
All right. So the first meeting we specifically kept it with the residents only. We wanted to be able to let the residents of the building get priority in the first meeting, be able to really speak to them. And it was scheduled for an hour, and it actually went on for over 2 hours, the very first meeting, because we really wanted to get feedback from the residents who were in the building with us. The second meeting was open to anyone. And we did have, I think, one person from the community, but we didn't have a lot. We did say at the end of the meeting that any meetings moving forward will be open to everyone in the area, and that we would do outreach to the neighboring buildings surrounding.
I recall we had a conversation at the last meeting about potentially working with the board office to try to broadcast information out about the meeting to the surrounding community. Carol Ann, keep me honest in that regard. Is that something the board office can do, or am I sort of?
Sure can. I initially had suggested that the office be contacted so that we could be present at the meeting. However, we weren't contacted. And I think, as administrative staff, I don't vote on an item. So I'm pretty neutral, as is my colleague. So it would have been helpful to have us at such a meeting. And if there's another one, I would strongly suggest that the office is invited to attend.
Right. And I think Mr. Clark and Mr. DeJohn, are you all affiliated? You have a representative here by the name of Resonator that's on your application.
Yes.
But we don't see these people come to our meetings. First of all, there's nobody here from Resonator, right?
No.
Okay. I'm not sure what their experience or involvement has been in this, because it seems like there's been some difficulty communicating things from them. And I'm happy.
We've had issues as well.
Well, what I would ask for you is, perhaps as a follow-up to this, to organize a meeting in connection with the community board, with the surrounding community, so that you can hear some additional feedback from beyond the one person who came to the second meeting, but some of the other folks who were on the petitions. And we're certainly open to having you back at the committee to hear more about this operation as we move towards early 2022, when you're planning to open. But I think the hope is that you're going to be speaking to the surrounding community, and that certainly was our expectation when we granted the approval back in June. Go ahead, Caroline.
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I ask a question? Apart from the residents at 275 Park, above the proposed establishment, what would you say are the number of other residences on the street, residents, I should say, on the street, if you had to give a number, and I understand it's just a guesstimate?
That's really hard to say. I don't even know how I would guess a number like that.
So do you have a sense of, do you have other large apartment buildings there? Is it mostly, you have other large buildings?
There are other buildings, yeah.
Do you have a lot of commercial? Like what is on that block? On that's Washington Avenue?
Washington.
What else is on that block?
There's a bakery, there's a liquor store, there's a pizzeria, there's a parking garage. Trying to remember, but it's all commercial on the ground level.
So would you say it's a heavily mixed use area?
Mixed use area, yeah.
Okay, thank
Mixed
you.
use meaning residential and commercial?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, I would say so.
Any manufacturing or a heavy duty commercial over there?
On that block, no, but I know the next block over there's manufacturing.
Yeah, there's a pizza place. There used to be a coffee place on the corner. I own in Clinton Hill Co-ops. I have a residence over there on Waverly between Green and Lafayette. I know the area very well. Even when they brought up, oh boy, I lost the connection. I lost the connection.
We hear you just fine.
We can still hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm definitely like familiar with the area. There's a lot of brownstones, a lot of privately owned houses in the area. The famous Chinese restaurant Kung Kao right on Washington and Fulton.
I'm sorry, just the block where the establishment, the proposed establishment is going to be located. Not the entire street, just that block.
That block, there's a pizzeria. Right next to it, they opened a place where you could sit in and eat. It's like a brick oven pizzeria there. Across the street, and then right across from, or right next to us, there's like a little coffee shop, like a vegetarian place. Across the street from that, there's a brand new building. Actually, it's a residency. A really nice renovated apartment building across the street. And there's a few apartments on the block, but not a lot. It's mostly like, little small businesses going down the block. And there used to be a Chase Bank on the corner, but they closed that. So yeah, that's that strip right there. And then also the club that was mentioned before, called Club Rain, used to be on that block as well, on the left-hand side of the street going towards the Navy Yard. I recall that as well.
I don't believe it's occupied now.
No, it's not occupied now. Or there's some factories on the block as well, with manufacturing places, not huge but small places.
Okay. Mr. Varela, you had your hand up. I wanted to hear your comment or thought.
What was my question? The owner of the building, and my apologies if I missed this during the presentation.
Fairstead.
Fairstead is manager, and then I was told private equities. I'm very curious about where this owner is. That he has such a, or they have so many of their tenants opposed, and then still granted this, and those conversations, have they been involved at all in this?
May I respond?
Can we hold for 1 second here, Cassie? So, look, I know that Fairstead has come up a bit in this. We can try to confirm that whether Fairstead was invited to the prior meeting and what degree to which they participated. But I want to keep the central point here on the fact that we need to have some further follow-up with the community in regards to this item. So I don't know, Cassie, were you able to say whether or not Fairstead came to the meetings, or do you know?
Fairstead was represented at one of the two meetings. The building is owned by private equity guys based in Greenwich, Connecticut and the Cayman Islands. I know. There are several lawsuits against the private equity guys as well as Fairstead. The building is really poorly run. There are multiple violations, probably 50 open violations right now, including fire violations. I'm not sure what other information I can provide regarding Fairstead.
It's
Okay.
perfect to the degree that you can summarize what the experience is with them. What strikes me about this, and I don't know anything about Fairstead or have any communication about it, but just from the experience of being here in this committee, I've heard Mr. Clark come and say that he had a conversation with a Robert Dunn, I believe, from Fairstead, who indicated that the residents were very happy about the establishment coming, which appears to not be the case. But I don't know whether that conversation took place. That's what Mr. Clark has said about this. Mr. Townsend at the last meeting said that there was a representation from Fairstead that this is going to be a building that is supposed to be family friendly for people. And certainly there could be direct, you could see that it would be the interest of Fairstead to say that to Mr. Clark and to say that to the residents of the building. But I don't feel like we're here necessarily to make this about Fairstead. I just saw that and thought it was interesting about this situation. Mr. Clark, what I would like to ask, and anybody else from the committee, feel free to share your thoughts about this, is, I think what you need to do is to try to take some steps with the community board to have a meeting with the larger community beyond just the folks from the building, because clearly there are some other people who have some concerns about this. And while your license was approved back in June, and I don't know when you're planning to go before the state liquor authority, or when you have filed, you have every right to do that by the law. I think it would be helpful to have that follow-up conversation, particularly as it's a condition of our approval.
Certainly, yeah. Fairstead attended both of the meetings that we had, and we'll have them at she's shaking her head, but they were at both, and they set them up, and we'll have them at the other ones moving forward.
Okay.
I would be.
They put the Zooms out.
Okay.
I just want to ask. Can I just ask this? Who can I talk to directly at the community board to coordinate and the meeting with the community? Is there someone that I can call and directly speak to?
It sure is. That someone would be me.
Okay, so
Carolyn Church. And I believe Mr. Clark may have my email address.
All right. Now, how quickly can we do this meeting? Is this something we can do in the next month, or is this something that's going to be?
Yeah, we can set something up in the next month. It's not a problem.
I mean, it could be sooner. It could be sooner than that for me. I mean,
well, I want to make sure that there's adequate outreach. Do you have an opinion on this, Ms. Church?
Excuse me?
Would you have an opinion on how quickly you think we can alert the community about the?
I think is set a date and make it 2 weeks out from the day that you decide. It gives people more than enough time to set their schedules.
Okay.
Because if I remember in the beginning, the meeting was set with too short a period, and I informed Resonator that was not acceptable, and I believe it was rescheduled.
Okay. All right. I'll take any other comments from the committee, but I'll recommend that Mr. Kwame and Mr. Ray schedule this meeting, and I'd like to welcome you back to the committee for another follow-up update in December, if that is acceptable to you.
Yes.
At the December meeting, sure.
Any other questions or comments on this?
Monique has her hand up.
So thank you, Emily. Monique?
I had a question. You mentioned that there is a parking lot on that block? Have you engaged with that parking lot owner?
No, there's no parking lot on that block.
No, the paid garage she's talking about, not the.
Oh,
the
oh,
underground.
no, I haven't. No.
The garage is owned by the super of our building, Victor. It's in our building. It's part of our building and it's owned by our super.
Okay. So let's definitely make sure that we engage with this garage. Kwame?
Yeah, we intend to. However, it's not a big garage.
Well, Casey, let me ask Casey a question. Do the residents, a lot of the residents use that parking lot to park?
Well, we can't ask Casey a question because we don't have presenters going back and forth with,
I'm sorry.
with folks. But
Sorry.
But I look, Cassie, you heard Mr. Ray's question. Do you have any response or feedback?
With regard to whether we park in Victor's garage underneath us, yes, we do, and it's full. There's no way that there'll be adequate space or any space for club goers. It's full with our stuff.
Okay.
That's
so
why.
Wait. Right. I want to make sure that we have this conversation in a follow-up community-based meeting with the folks in the community, with you, Mr. Kwame, and with you, Mr. Ray. And I greatly appreciate you coming back to our committee about this, as we'll continue to monitor this situation, and hopefully we'll be able to get to a point where there's a little bit more common understanding between folks about the circumstances on the block and the potential impact of your venue. I think these kind of situations are ones where we're only going to get to a point of success if there's a little bit of giving on both sides, and I'm hopeful that that's going to be part of the resolution that comes out of this. Of the follow-up community meeting, to understand, what's gonna happen in once this thing opens. I'll be happy to take any other questions from the members of the committee, and then I'd like to move on to the rest of our liquor licenses. All right, we'll see you in December. Thank you very much,
Brandon.
Mr. Kwame. Thank
you.
you, Cassie, Matt, and everyone who came from the building or who gave us feedback.
Thank you, Brandon.
All right. Next up on the agenda tonight, we've got new full on premise Even Hotel, 46 Nevins Street. Is there somebody here from that location? Is that
Yes,
you,
there
Mr.
is.
Dorn?
Yes, there is, Mr.
Great.
Chair.
I'm just going to tell you, because of the late hour, we'd like you to keep the presentation brief. And how are we presenting the application?
We'll certainly keep it brief, Mr. Chair. I'm the attorney of record for the application, Max Bookman. I'll give the presentation. I do have my associate, Mr. Dorn, with me, as well as two representatives from my client who are here for any questions to the extent you have.
Who's presenting this? Jessica, are you presenting this or?
Yeah, I can.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Can everyone see that?
yes.
Okay, great. You can go ahead. I'll just scroll as you speak.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica. And hello again, CB2. My name is Max Bookman. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and all committee members for giving us your time and attention tonight. My firm routinely appears before your community board. I wanted to take a moment just to say hello to Carol Ann Church, who we routinely work with, and I work with a lot of community boards and administrative staff, and Carol Ann is among the best, if not the best. So we're always grateful for a case that we have in community board 2, being able to work with her. Tonight's application is for Even Hotel, an existing hotel in your community that was built in 2015. And the hotel is being sold. So this is a transfer of the hotel's beer and wine license that covers the hotel. It's being sold to a new owner, BCRE Capital. The CEO, Shai Shamir, is here tonight to answer any questions if anyone has any directly of him. And it's going to have a new operator as well. And that's Crescent Hotels and Resorts. And we have a representative from Crescent here to the extent anyone has any questions. You may not know the Crescent name, but you definitely know the names of the types of hotels that they manage throughout New York and throughout the United States, including Marriott's, Westin's, Hilton's, Doubletree, Hyatt, Sheraton's. They're an experienced hotel management company. So that's who's coming in. As I said, it's an application to transfer the beer and wine license. And I say a beer and wine license because it's not, in fact, a full liquor license. This hotel is, when it was built right next to the Hare Krishna temple, thereby prohibiting under the 200-foot law, a full liquor license from being issued. So this is one of the rare hotel beer and wine licenses that exist in New York State. Because it's beer and wine, there is no full liquor, and it's also not subject to the 500-foot law. The method of operation for the application, which is what Jessica is scrolling to now, is aligned completely with what the hotel's current operation is. So there's a small restaurant on the lobby level. The alcohol hours, which are on the preceding page, are 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. 7 days a week. Again, this is primarily for the benefit of hotel guests. To the extent that there are events, there are corporate events in the meeting room. There's no large ballroom facility, no large food and beverage facility here. There's just some meeting room for corporate events. There's no DJs, no dancing, no parties, no really nearby residential to speak of either. So to keep it brief, because that was your request, Mr. Chairman, really no changes to the operation that has been in place. It's just a change in ownership and thus change in who's holding the liquor license. And so I'll just stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody on the committee or in the public may have.
Sure, I'll be happy to facilitate that. Thank you, Mr. Bookman. I just want you to know, and is there anyone here besides you from the hotel, or are you just here as their representative?
No, the CEO of the new owner, Shai Shamir, is here. He's on the line, as well as a representative from Crescent, the new hotel management company. They're here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for coming. I just want you all to know that the one type of liquor license where we've seen the most issues in our community have been hotel licenses. They have not been at even hotel, and I don't believe we have prior complaints, although the board office will keep me honest on that. But I want you to know that when you have a hotel in this district, regardless of whether you feel there's a lot of residents around, it's important that you understand that you're a community member, and that any noise that is excessive, or any people congregating outside, smoking or engaging in loud behavior, could be disruptive to the surrounding community. And I want to make sure that that point hits home, even if we aren't facing a torrent of community concern, because those things kind of can happen. I understand it's a transfer. I understand it's beer and wine. I did see that there's some private events, but I think you've explained that somewhat. To the extent that I don't feel like it's going to be the kind of private events that I've seen at other hotels. But I do want you to understand that there needs to be somebody on site at all times to control noise and make sure that there isn't impact on the surrounding community. Who would that person be?
Oh, first, before I let my client answer who that person would be, I would just want to say thank you for that comment, Mr. Chair. That's what our understanding of as to why you had asked, or the committee wanted us to present tonight, was to get that comment across. So I had already conveyed that to my client, but of course important to hear it directly from the committee. My understanding as well is that even itself, that hotel, given the nature of the hotel, given it's not F&B heavy, a little down in the presentation when Jessica gets to it. I think you're at a good point now though, Jessica, where you are, but you'll see some renderings of what the space looks like after they're going to clean it up a little bit. It's a standard sort of hotel lobby restaurant with a small beer and wine bar. So your concerns are and the concerns of the community are certainly heard. And I think there's reason to feel assured that with this operation, those concerns are not going to come to fruition. In any event, could the representative from Crescent who is here just kindly introduce yourself for the record and answer Mr. Chair's question regarding who the day-to-day operator would be if we have that manager hired yet?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Greg is still on, but I can take that. Greg, you still on? Okay.
Yes. Hi, Greg Riley with Crescent Hotels, Regional Director of Operations. Typically in this type of hotel, there is a manager on duty 24/7. We also have FSD/security that's on 24/7 as well.
Right. And just let me clarify, right? This type of hotel is a limited service hotel. More of it's not anything like, for example, the Ace Hotel is across the street. It's not a lifestyle hotel. It's actually for wellness. And the hotel that they've been there since the last 6 years, right? They're gonna stay basically with the same franchise, which is one of the intercontinental brands. And it's going to be managed by Crescent, who's a national manager. But the type of the hotel is as such that if there is any use of the bar, it's being used by the hotel guests. It's only 200 rooms. So it's a very little gathering that happen, if at all, inside the hotel. So it's not that type of a lifestyle hotel at all. So just to clarify that.
Thank you. Okay, just to expedite this, any questions from members of the committee?
And then I just want to ask, this is Alejandro, just want to confirm that what Mr. Bookman presented, that there isn't an outdoor space.
Thank you for that question, Alejandro. Yes, there is, as we disclosed and is in the diagram, there is and has always been a small courtyard off the lobby level with, and thank you for going to that point, Jessica. You can see it right there on the top left of your screen, the courtyard. It's off the lobby level. There's no residents in sight of that courtyard. We have a rendering later down of what that looks like after it's cleaned up. It's just brick walls. It's the Hare Krishna temple on one side. It's our structure on the other. And that's what's been in operation since 2015. And when the hotel opened, and we expect to continue the use of that small courtyard.
Right. So basically the number one neighbor is us. So we are our own neighbor because the windows of the hotel are facing our little courtyard. So of course, it's our intention to keep that space quiet as well.
Okay. Just for the purposes of the application, since the section for outdoor doesn't list hours, if I guess if you plan on serving liquor or of any kind, beer or wine, maybe you could update that.
Sure. I think our intention was, since we understand normally with your committee and we get that outdoor hours sometimes warrant different hours of operation. Since that's not been the case here and we didn't anticipate a real need for that, we didn't include any sort of separate listing of the hours of operation. So we expect that to be consistent with the hotel's alcohol service hours. Alcohol would only be served out there outside at the same times that it's inside, which is 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. But if Alejandro and the board feel that you'd like to see that on an updated questionnaire, just so that there's no ambiguity, we're happy to provide that.
We would like to see that. There's a box to check for outdoors, and if I wasn't thinking this is going to be an outdoor place until you said that. I don't know if that was on the application that was presented previously when the original license was granted several years ago, but we do want to make sure that that's noted. So please provide that information.
Absolutely. And I don't think you were suggesting this, Mr. Chair, but we did, I can't speak for the prior application, but in our 30-day notice to the board office, we did select outdoor space. Your point is well taken about your questionnaire, and we will update it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions for the applicant from the committee or the community? Hearing none, do we have a motion for this applicant?
To approve. Alejandro.
Movement from Alejandro. I'll second the motion. Any discussion? No discussion. Okay. I vote in favor. Jessica, how do you vote? She votes in favor. Alejandro, how do you vote?
Favor.
Nicole, how do you vote?
Yes.
Akasua, how do you vote? Yes. Mr. Harrison, how do you vote?
Yes.
Miss Anadu, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Andrews, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Miss McKnight, did I get you?
You did.
Okay, great. And Miss Cumberbatch, how do you vote?
Yes, and it's Cumberbatch.
Gotcha. Sorry, I'm just speaking correctly. Apologies. Okay. I believe I've got
Here.
everybody. Who did I
No.
miss?
Mr. Newmark,
Mr. Newmark. Okay, sorry, Mr. Newmark. How do you vote?
Yes.
Okay.
what about
great.
Miss Einhorn? Did you get Miss Einhorn?
And Miss Latrell.
The child's not yet a member.
Okay.
My bad.
Miss Einhorn, I apologize. I was personally unaware that you were a member of the committee, but welcome to the committee and feel free to cast your vote. I think maybe we can come back to Ms. Einhorn if we need to. This application has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda for the evening, we've got 86 South Portland Dinner Party LLC.
Hi, how are you all? This is Camille Jetta speaking. I'm the owner and head chef of Dinner Party.
Okay. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Great.
We have the application up. It looks like you're going to be doing 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Tuesday through Sunday indoors. You do not have any outdoor space?
No outdoor space and no plans to build out any.
Okay.
And please excuse me for being off camera. I literally just stepped out of the kitchen. We're in the middle of our dinner service right now, but I obviously wanted to be here. It's super important. The restaurant is really, really tiny, only 20 seats, one seating a night. Super kind of quiet, cozy place. There was a restaurant at 86 South Portland before, a beloved local spot called Pequeña, which did have a liquor license. So this is really just an application to basically renew that or get a new one. But it would not represent any disruption or major change in the community.
Okay. Are there any residences above or near this location?
There are not residences above it, but there are several residences on the street, yes.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
So I just want to clarify, because I live very close, there's not anything directly above, but there's in the buildings that are next door, there's tons, like surround on either side, there is quite a bit of residential. Nothing.
Right.
Thank you, Ms. Anadu. And I didn't see anything about cross streets. I would note this is between Lafayette and Fulton on South Portland.
That's correct.
What kind of food are you serving? And when will you plan to open?
We're already operational. So the food is sort of kind of Californian, kind of French. Our menu changes every week. It's a set menu. So we don't even really want to have a full bar or anything like that. Basically, we just want the ability to pair our delicious food with suggested drinks, including cocktails, but it's kind of simple, rustic, very classical French American, homey kind of cooking.
Do you have a license currently to do like beer and wine, and you're upgrading to full on premise? Is that the request?
No, we do not have any kind of license.
So you don't do liquor or alcohol right now, and how long have you been operating there?
It's been about 3 months now, but it's
okay.
We obviously are hoping to move forward. We're amazingly, with the support of the community, doing okay so far, but in order for the business to thrive, it's of course pretty tantamount that we are able to serve alcohol.
Are you planning to hire more people for your location?
I think probably eventually. Right now it's such a tiny team, a very tight-knit team, but probably when we are hopefully eventually able to serve alcohol, we would need to take on more staff in order to basically just meet the demand of customers placing orders.
Okay. Questions from the committee?
Emily?
Emily, go ahead.
Just as far as when you do get to the point of hiring, do you plan on hiring from the community?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our staff already is pretty local. It's 100% woman team right now. This is a small woman-owned restaurant, a bunch of young people. And we really are just kind of all about creating opportunities for young cooks who might not have a ton of experience in the industry. So yeah, definitely. We want this to be a community place first and foremost.
It says you're going to rent out occasionally. Do you have a sense as to what the private events will be like? Will there be somebody on site for them? And what's the thought process around that?
Absolutely. So we've had a few private events already. Basically it's just people essentially reserving all 20 seats, and we customize a menu with them. But as a chef, I would be there every single time. I would never fully turn over the space to someone else. By private events, we more mean giving people the ability to be in there with just their group and not customers that they don't know.
Okay. Any other questions from either the committee or the community on this application?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Andrews.
What about your bathroom accessibility? What about that? And as far as that, as well as getting into your restaurant?
It is accessible. There is a ramp into, like, the full entrance of the restaurant is quite accessible. The bathroom is a bit small. I'm not 100% sure if it meets accessibility needs, but it had been my understanding that given that this is a space that I took over, that we don't necessarily need to renovate. But of course, if our license is contingent on that, then
you're gonna have to renovate. You might have wheelchair folks that come in, so you're gonna have to look into that. I'm sorry to say, yes, you're gonna have to look into that.
Well,
okay, duly noted.
I will say this: it's not a condition of your approval for you to do anything with respect to the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it is, from our committee, and Mr. Andrews is an advocate for these issues, and we respect that as well too. That the being able to accommodate folks with disabilities is part of being a good member of the community, and we support that notion and hope that you'll do whatever you can to make everyone feel accommodated at this restaurant.
Absolutely, yeah. We have made all of the renovations that we were able to make with the startup capital that we had at the beginning, and of course hope to continue to be able to make it a place that as many people as possible are able to gather and enjoy. And yeah, basically as soon as that's financially feasible for us, that's definitely something that we want to accomplish.
Okay. Any other questions?
Brandon, this is
Mr.
Alejandro.
Varela?
Yeah, hi Camille, Alejandro here. Appreciate you balancing the kitchen and this meeting. Thank you. Just on the list of things that don't necessarily affect your application, but that is would like to encourage, piggybacking off what my colleague Emily said, local hiring, and even a step further, I would say, I think it's great that it's an all women team or an all female team. Black and brown employees also, I want to advocate for that. Our communities are hit higher with rates of unemployment. We have large pockets of unemployment within this very sort of growing and wealthy district. And so I hope when given the opportunity, you will give brown and black people an opportunity to work in your restaurant and for moving up the chain as well.
Oh, of course. I mean, our floor manager, the wonderful Michelle, is black, and the one non-binary person on our team, Declan, is also a person of color. It's definitely really, really, really important to us to make sure that our team is diverse and that people from absolutely all backgrounds have the opportunity to advance and to lead.
Thank you, Camille, and good luck with your restaurant.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this applicant? Do we have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
You're moving to approve, Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Andrews. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. I'll try to do better this time. Mr. Varela, how do you vote?
In favor, I support, yes.
Okay. I support too. Ms. Anadu, how do you vote?
I support.
Okay. Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Ms. Cumberbatch?
Yes.
Ms. Cobb? Okay. Ms. McKnight?
Yes.
Ms. Thurston?
In favor.
Mr. Newmark?
Yes.
And Ms. Einhorn? I think we got to put Ms. Einhorn down for an abstain because she is not responding. Okay, motion has passed. Thank you very much for your presentation. Good luck with your establishment. Next up.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Have a great night, guys.
327 Atlantic Avenue, Absolute Coffee. We have somebody here from that location.
Yes, it's me, Kareem.
Hello, Kareem.
How are you?
Great.
I just want to clarify something. It's not a full liquor license. It's just beer and wine. That's all.
Right. Okay, so you're going to be 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. And is there any outdoor?
We have the outdoor seating because of COVID. So the city kind of like gave us that permit to build out that.
So you're gonna have like an open restaurants thing out in the street? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know, this would be falling under the open restaurant or not. It's just the parking lane. We have.
Oh, you have like a shed out there.
Yes, yeah.
Cross street is Smith and Hoyt.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And this is a coffee shop?
Yes.
Are you also gonna have food?
I'm already having food right now.
Okay, how long have you been open?
Almost 8 years now.
Okay, great. Thank you for all of that. Members of the committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Is it Botros?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kareem, I just want to say I was by your place on Sunday during the antique. It's a very nice place.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the community for Mr. Botros?
If I may, Brandon.
Go ahead, Mr. Varela.
Mr. Botros, Carol Ann asks if you could clarify because you have currently checked 2 types of liquor licenses.
Not a restaurant, just this is kind of like I didn't know what like technically what this should fall under. So this is why I wasn't sure which one, but it won't be just a coffee shop, and I'm looking to serve some wine and beer, like just in addition.
Okay, and if you didn't have the street cafe that during the pandemic, just to clarify, do you have a sidewalk cafe apart from the street?
No, the sidewalk is not that wide to have a sidewalk cafe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Botros? All right, hearing none, is there a motion on this application?
To approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion
Move to
from Mr.
approve.
Harrison. I second. Any discussion on the motion?
Caroline, was that enough clarification about the beer and wine?
Yes, thank you. I can figure it out. I'll be in touch with the applicant to have that page amended.
Any other discussion? All right. I vote in favor. Ms. Thurston, how do you vote? Favor. Mr. Varela, how do you vote?
In favor.
Mr. Harrison, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Cumberbatch, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Cobb, how do you vote? I couldn't understand you, Ms. Cobb. You want to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thank you. Ms. McKnight, how do you vote?
Yes.
Great. Ms. Anadu, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Newmark, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Einhorn, are you still with us? Do you have a vote?
Because they weren't a child.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry I didn't respond earlier. I don't think I'm a member of the committee yet.
So if they were.
Okay.
I was waiting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't aware either, Ms. Einhorn. Ms. Church, is Ms. Einhorn a member of the committee, and should we consider her appropriate to vote?
Yes, I believe I'm sorry if I did not communicate that clearly. Yes.
Okay. Ms. Einhorn, you can vote in favor, abstain, or no on.
I'm in favor.
Okay, that's great. Did you have any votes for the two prior applications that you wanted to share?
Yeah, let me put them in the chat.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't think I missed anybody, but please feel free to say so if I did and you're on the committee. I think I got through all the squares. Regardless, this motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Botros, for coming to us, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Next up is our last new liquor license, 82 Washington, Lil M LLC. We have somebody here from that location.
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's nice to see
we were
you.
running this late. I would have gone home.
Okay. I'll just ask you to keep in mind that we are very late at this point, and if you can hit the high points here, we certainly will follow up with anything that we need to.
All right. I will hit the high points because I also have a correction. The notice was sent as full liquor, and this is a full liquor application, although the first round of our questionnaire incorrectly checked tavern wine. The extent of food service is consistent with tavern, but it is for a full liquor license application. And you can see the pictures in this application. The notice on the wall says beer, wine, cider, and liquor. So that was an error on my part. But essentially, this is going to be a sort of an all-day cafe concept at 82 Washington. Elle Barton is the principal. She's also here. I see her now with her child. She owns and operates at Izzy Rose and Clementine. And this is sort of, right across the street from the Navy Yard. She was talking to me earlier. It's really designed to sort of cater to people who are sort of working at the Navy Yard, hanging, coming and going at the Navy Yard. It's not a huge concept. It's a total of 40 seats, closing at 1 a.m. nightly. Again, coffee in the mornings, open early for Yeah, were you gonna open early in the morning?
Well, in the morning, we are going to be open from 8 to 3 p.m. and then we're shut down. And then we switch over to dinner service. And then we'll be open most likely just till midnight. Like the more I think about it, but just I put 1 a.m. just to put 1 a.m. as a later option. But most likely it's going to be a midnight closing operation. Very like sit down food, have a cocktail, not a bar by any means, like a nightclub or anything like that.
Okay. So you're going to be open until it looks like 1 a.m. on the indoors. There's no outdoors at this location?
No, there is no outdoors.
Got it. And let's see, I'm trying to scroll through to understand whether there will be any private events, but I can't find the question in here. Are you doing renting out your place for private events?
Not really, no. If it would, it'd be like during the day for like photo shoots and stuff like that, but not for like bar use or anything.
Okay. What kind of food is it there?
It's vegan and vegetarian. Well, it's vegan.
Okay.
So we'll be doing tapas and grab and go things during the
Got
day,
it.
and also more small plates in the evening, salads and appetizers.
Okay.
Yeah, I realized we left that question unanswered the first go around. I'll make sure, we had sent an updated one, but very late today, so I apologize for that.
What's the surrounding neighborhood like? I see you're going to close the kitchen at 10 p.m., but the restaurant closes at 1 a.m. So is this going to be like some kind of bar scene between that period of time?
No, like I said, we probably will be closing more around midnight, but the kitchen will close at 10, meaning the last order might go in at 10. We need to close the kitchen a few hours before we actually close, just to give the kitchen staff enough time so that they're not there after midnight.
Brandon, is this, just to clarify, is this place around the corner from the from the comedy club that took up a lot of time
Yes.
earlier? So, okay.
It's next to us, and I am not a resident, but I am a tenant. I rent from 275 Park. Yeah, so I've heard all this, ongoings with the Laugh Factory and all of that. I haven't really been a part of it. What I'm doing here is more like an after work restaurant situation with, a liquor license. But I've been on maternity leave. So all of this stuff with the Laugh Factory is kind of
right.
Been gone.
Thank you. And we don't expect you to speak to that other location, but you indicated that there are 3 establishments that are located within a 500-foot radius of your place. And I'm not one to really bring the 500-foot rule into full extent here, but I'm just wondering what are those 3 establishments?
The ones that we had on our, I think the last page should have been like the SLA printout. I think we had 2. We had Il Porto Brick Oven Restaurant and Park Avenue Health Club, actually.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're familiar with the Park Avenue Health Club. Okay. Any other questions from the members of the committee for the applicant?
Yes. Oh, sorry. So one on the application, it mentions acoustic. So are you talking about having live performances? Because acoustic and then music are marked separately. So
no live music. We don't plan to do that there. We've already brought in a soundproofing person just for regular music, as far as I'm concerned. Because we know that the residents, there are a lot of residents above me, and I don't foresee it fit for a place that would have live music or anything like that. So that's never been the intention.
Yeah, I'm just responding to your application, which has that check. So I think just it feels like live music changes this for me. So just if it's not going to be, it would just be good for the application to reflect what's actually going to happen in the space, particularly given.
Of course, that's not a problem.
Okay.
And then as far as hiring goes, sorry, last thing, just
ahead.
in terms of hiring in the neighborhood. You know, again, as Alejandro said, if you heard the last one, it's not obviously a requirement for your application, but, you know, as the neighborhood changes, we really encourage like local hiring, brown and black hiring as much as possible.
Of course, yes. And I already have, you know, a diverse staff that I work with, and all my businesses are very diverse.
Great, thank you.
Hi.
All right. Mr. Varela, did you also plan to have a question or a comment that you were going to make on this application?
I think the first one was answered. The second one was just, I wanted to clarify that the donut burger cheddar is also vegan.
Yes, it is. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's completely healthy for you, but it's.
No, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee or the community on this? Barry, did I see your hand? Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, just a quick, it's almost a comment and a question. You say that you're not going to be operating as a bar, but you're going to be open 2 to 3 hours after the kitchen is serving and still serving alcohol. So if you want to be consistent, why don't you stop alcohol service when the kitchen closes? So this way people aren't coming in and just drinking and using your place as a bar.
Well, the kitchen will close at 10, but plates will still be going out up until 10:30. You know, it's more of every restaurant and bar that I have owned, we close the kitchen at least an hour to 2 hours prior so that the kitchen can close and everybody leaves at the same time. There will be snacks, so other things that are like available, like desserts that don't require the kitchen to be open. But I see your point and I get that, but it's more of a just trying to get everybody out of the building at a respectable time and not having the kitchen be open so late.
Most places work with that. We don't usually see that kind of a gap with the explanation that you're giving. That's why I'm raising it as a question. It's not typical.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Harrison, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you, Brendan. I just wanted to piggyback on what Barry just said, because it was essentially my point. I would be more comfortable if the applicant and or their representative were amenable in updating or amending the application if they showed either, as I think Barry already stated, that the alcohol service would end sooner or that the establishment would close sooner. Because the gap between, or the time period between the restaurant stopping serving at 10 and the establishment actually closing at 1 is kind of.
Okay, I got your point. Thank you, John. So Ms. Barton and Ms. Hoffman, are you amenable to potentially reducing the alcohol hours a little bit? I mean, I will note for the location that we have next door to you with the comedy club, they did agree to close their venue at midnight during the week. And while you don't have to necessarily have the exact same hours as that, there is a bit of a concern on the committee about the lateness of the hour and the gap in time.
Oh, could you do like midnight on weekdays? You know, like the...
Yes, midnight's totally fine. Yes, I agree to midnight.
Okay.
That's across the board, not going later on the weekends, just 12 in general.
Okay. Well, I'll leave that for the committee discussion on the subject, but do we have any other questions from either the committee or the community about this application? Okay, do we have a motion on the application?
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a second from motion from Mr. Harrison, second from Mr. Andrews. Discussion on the motion. Any thoughts from the committee about what the hours should be or what it could be at this location? It seems the applicant's willing to do 12 midnight, 7 days a week. Do we feel that that's a good solution here, or do we have any other idea?
I guess I just have, maybe this is more of a process question, apologies. If my concern isn't about that specifically. My concern is that I feel like there are too many things in writing on their application that they're saying, sure, I would just love to see a revised application. So I don't know, sorry, where in the process I'm supposed to, is that a separate motion or how that goes? But I would just like their actual application to reflect the times that we come up with that won't have acoustic, et cetera.
Whatever we agree, I'll put.
Oh, sorry, that was a question for a process question. Sorry. Thank you.
But she's saying the right thing, Emily. They'll update the application and submit it to the office.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
We do expect that will happen. Thank you. And thank you, Jessica, for clarifying. All right. So with the midnight close 7 days a week on this application, is there any further discussion from the committee? Okay. I vote in favor. Ms. Thurston, how do you vote? Okay. Ms. Anadu, how do you vote?
Same.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Cobb, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. McKnight, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Varela?
In favor, yes.
Mr. Newmark?
In favor.
Ms. Cumberbatch?
Yes.
Ms. Einhorn?
Yes.
And Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. I hope I didn't miss anybody. This is approved. Next up on the agenda, we should have our renewals for the evening. Let's take them in. There are 4 that are listed here, but I'd like to take 3 first before and discuss the 4th one. 531 Myrtle Avenue, Dunhuang, 376 Classon Avenue, Speedy, Romeo, 17 Old Fulton Street, Julianna's. Ms. Church, any concerns or complaints from the community about those 3 locations?
No.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion on those 3 renewals? Mr. Newmark, I'll second. Discussion on the motion. Before we finish this, I forgot this point. Anyone from the community have any concerns or questions about those 3 locations? Okay, hearing none. I vote in favor. Mr. Newmark, how do you vote?
In favor.
Ms. Cumberbatch? I didn't get your vote, Ms. Cumberbatch. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Einhorn?
Yes.
That was Ms. Cobb. Ms. Einhorn?
In favor.
Great. Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes.
Ms. Thurston?
Yes.
Mr. Varela?
Yes.
Ms. Nadu?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, did I get you?
You did not. I vote in favor.
Okay. All right, my squares are going in the wrong direction. Who did I miss anyone? Okay, those renewals are approved. The last renewal is 275 Park Avenue Country Club, or Park Avenue Health Club, sorry. If we remember back in January, we heard from a transfer application for a applicant who wished to commence having liquor at this location, and the residents of this building came out with evidence of fires, flood, the lack of a working fire alarm, and a number of concerns about the operators and the veracity of what they were telling us, because there was a statement that they were not serving alcohol currently, and we found some evidence of their website indicating that they were. I don't want to rehash that whole discussion from January, but it's of some controversy in that there was an existing license, presumably with the old operators that pertains to this same location. And by approving this license, Ms. Church, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would be approving an application, we would be approving the location to have to be operated by the same applicants, would we not?
No, this would be an existing, this is a renewal, so it's an existing application. It's an existing licensed business.
I understand it's an existing licensed business, but it was an existing license before we got it. And we had applicants who came to us from this location in January where we voted, no, we're not going to move forward with this license. And that was supported by the executive committee, and we sent a letter out. And the question is, who are going to be the operators associated with this? Do we know?
If it's a renewal, then it is the original owner. Otherwise, it would have either been a transfer or a new application.
Right.
So it's not the folks who came to us.
Right.
This is the existing license that had been previously renewed, now being renewed for another 2 years.
Okay. So knowing that it's the existing license and that this is a renewal, does anyone want to make a motion at this point about this application? Because we don't have anyone here to speak about this particular application, unless there's any members of the community who want to speak about the Park Avenue Health Club. Are there?
Cassie.
Hi, may I?
Sure, go ahead.
It's me again. It's the same building, and I'll just read the statement that I read in January. On behalf of the tenants of 275 Park Avenue, we stand in opposition of the health club's application for a renewed license to sell liquor, wine, beer. We are residents of the building. The health club, also known as Body by Brooklyn Spa, has in the past rented out the facility to third parties for use as large private party venue, hosting parties that cause late and loud disturbances for residents of the building. It's unclear whether those parties or the liquor were properly permitted. Allowing this site to expand their liquor license and continue to use the spa as a venue for private parties is particularly dangerous at a time when public health recommendations strongly discourage larger gatherings. The spa already serves liquor to some extent, and expansion of this license would only serve to expand their ability to disrupt quality of life for us, the tenants of the building, as well as potentially threaten public within the community. In addition, the applicants have recently had 2 fires on the premises and have previous and pending violations of fire code.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anyone on the committee have any questions or comments at this point? Or would anyone like to make a motion?
I have some questions.
Okay.
We
Mr.
actually
Newmark?
have a motion on the floor.
That's a good point. So I'll make a motion, and we can vote in favor or against this motion. But I'm going to move that we disapprove this application. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Newmark.
I would 100% be voting against it if it's the same people who came before us. I'm totally confused. Who could possibly be the operator with a renewal necessary if the people coming before us in January came to transfer the liquor license? So I'm totally confused. It doesn't make sense to me. I understood what you said, Carol Ann, but it still doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know who I'm voting against or voting for.
Well, let me just say this, Ms. Church, can you hold on for 1 second? I had a response to Barry. One thing I just think that we should consider is that regardless of who the people who were applying for this transfer back in January, the reports that we got, which appeared to be corroborated, indicated that there were fires and a flood that were done under the existing operator who was associated with this license. And that kind of experience, whoever those operators are, would give me concern about approving a renewal of their license. That's my feeling. Ms. Church, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to sort of, I'm not sure if Barry or anyone else needed further clarification on what was happening here. There was an attempt to sell the business, and that was who came before us in January. Or to turn over management of the business with the liquor license. The committee didn't recommend it. Maybe they have not moved forward. So this is just a regular renewal as, say, the previous licenses that were renewed tonight, that were recommended for renewal tonight. There is no additional, to us anyway, from what we can see, there's nothing additional to this renewal. And that's it.
Can I ask a question? This is Latrell. No?
Sure, Latrell, absolutely, you can ask a question, but I just wanted to honor Mr. Varela as a committee member who had his hand up. Mr. Varela?
I'd like to see it. I've asked a lot of questions. Latrell hasn't asked many.
Okay, well, I appreciate your graciousness, and Latrell, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I guess my question is, in Cassie's statement, she said that they rent it out to third parties. So whoever they rented it out to, it could be the people who came to us before in January. So that could be the third party, the next party. So by you voting for this license, that means you're still giving them the opportunity to still proceed with their business. I think they're still there. Is that what I think that's what Cassie is saying? If they're still there, they're still renting it out. So by renewing their license, they're still going to rent the license out to whoever they want to rent it out to.
Okay.
So that means all the problems is going to continue for the neighbors in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Varela, you also had something you wanted to say?
I feel I'm almost completely understanding what's happening here, and I just want to make sure. The people who came before us recently for the transfer, I remember them saying that the things that had gone wrong, all of the violations, had been with the predecessor. Since the license was transferred to them, have there been issues?
Well, we don't know that the license has been transferred to them. I can find no evidence on the State Liquor Authority website that there is a new license or a new holder of this. Ms. Church, have you heard differently?
I have not, and as a matter of fact, I can't remember if there were a late renewal. However, their license expired, is inactive since 9/30, which means that if they were slightly late, it's going to extend until the date that the community board actually receives the notice. So that could be a reason why it's inactive.
Right.
I mean, the answer to that question is of great importance to me, because most of those violations and infractions were on the previous owners. And I thought when they came, it was sort of like a clean slate, and the new applicants made lots of promises. And so I wouldn't want to hold them to the previous licensees, actions. That doesn't seem fair to me. But if we don't know, I agree that letting them proceed is also dangerous. Dangerous as far as possible serious, fires or other safety concerns.
Can I make one more comment in this space? Is that, and this is not to sway the decision either which way, but I'm hearing concerns about safety, and not approving the license does not remove the conditions that are being described. If they do exist, it's not removing those conditions, because you can go to a place that and sit in the sauna or have a massage and not have liquor. So that is probably something the committee may want to address separately, but just saying we don't recommend, the SLA renew this license isn't going to remove the conditions that are being commented on.
Okay, I appreciate that point of view, and I think that that's a fair statement. Is there anyone else on the committee who has a comment or question as part of our discussion on this? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. Mr. Varela, the motion is to disapprove the renewal of this application. How do you vote?
Abstain.
Okay. Mr. Newmark, how do you vote? I can't hear you, Mr. Newmark.
Sorry about that. I abstain.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, how do you vote?
I guess I'll abstain, I guess.
Okay. Ms. Cobb, how do you vote? Can't hear you, Ms. Cobb.
I abstain. I'm confused. I abstain.
Okay. Ms. Thurston, how do you vote?
In favor.
Okay. Ms. Nadu, how do you vote?
I abstain.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, how do you vote?
I vote yes, Brandon.
You vote yes. Okay. Ms. Cumberbatch, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Okay. Ms. Einhorn, how do you vote?
I just wanted to like.
In favor.
understand, do you know?
Okay. Yeah, I vote in favor. Are there any other people I missed on the committee in terms of a vote?
You missed me, Brandon. It's
Sorry, Ms.
Nicole.
McKnight.
Yeah.
How do you
Yes.
vote? You vote in favor?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Thurston, do you have a tally of where we stand? I'm sorry to put you on the spot for that.
Yeah, it's 5-0-6. 6 abstentions, 5 in favor. So the motion fails.
The motion does not pass. So that was a motion to disapprove. Does anyone want to make any other motions at this time? Because remember, the outcome is going to be that we're going to take no action with respect to this item. Mr. Newmark.
Can we make a motion that we have clarity about who the holder of the license is and who the operator of the site is before we vote on whether or not we want to approve the renewal?
So I take that point, but I think that that's a motion for effectively to ask for additional information, which the board office is capable of requesting and providing to us. So I'm not sure if we'll need a motion to do that.
Well, I was simply asking a question about whether a motion like that could be made. If
Okay.
not, I'm fine with not doing it, but that's why I had to abstain. because
Right.
Just, I'm not.
I can appreciate that, Mr. Newmark. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to move it along. Ms. Church, what do you see about the ability to get more information about this application?
Ask the license holder to clarify.
Okay. So here's what I think we should do. Let's try to get the additional information about who is the operator and get it straight what the facts are with this application. And, you know, I don't know where we are on the 30-day clock, but I'm more concerned that our committee make the right decision about the application, I think, than you know, whether we meet some clock or not. So let's put this one over to next month, and in the meantime, let's try to get the information.
Right? Can I just say that and I don't know how to put this without saying it as it is. The SLA is going to automatically renew a license such as this without waiting on a recommendation from the community board.
I understand that, and I think we're all aware of that issue. The point is that we made a motion to disapprove, it failed. I asked if there was any other motions to be made. No one made any motions. So with that in mind, there's no other action that the community board can take with respect to this other than potentially putting it over until next time because we didn't have enough information for it to make a decision this time.
Next time being next 2 years or next month, and maybe that's where I got confused, because by next month.
Brandon, this is Alejandro here, just very quickly. In the past, we have approved applications conditionally with stipulations. Can we disapprove with a stipulation?
Well, that would be another motion.
Okay, I didn't know if that even carries weight at the SLA level. That's what I'm saying.
Stipulations carry weight, and they've been shown to carry weight in prior experience here. Did you want to make a motion like that?
Something along the lines, and I could use some help here, of we disapprove this application because serious safety concerns at the establishment have not been addressed, or that if they were sort of broached with us, that we would be okay with approving. That's something along those lines. Does that work?
Well, the issue is that there have been safety concerns at this address, and you know, I think that's more of a reason for why we're making the motion than a condition, which would be some act that the applicant must fulfill in order to potentially get our approval. I think that's what you'd be looking for in terms of a condition, something that the applicant would have to do in order to get our approval if it's a motion, if it's a condition on a disapproval motion.
So this would much easier, or it would flow better if it was an approval with a condition.
Well, you can make a motion however you want to make a motion. You can make a motion as approval with a condition. You can make a motion to disapprove with a condition as well too. But the idea is that if the condition is not fulfilled on an approval motion, that it will be disapproved. And the idea on a disapproval motion, if there's a condition that's not fulfilled, that it would be disapproved. But if it is fulfilled, it would be approved. And that's what we have to think about.
Carolyn, if they get disapproved by us or disapproved vote, does the SLA go to them, or do they have to wait 2 years? No, they can reapply, right?
I don't believe that a negative recommendation is going to have much impact with the SLA. While the safety concerns are very meaningful and should be addressed, and I really can't tell about the inner workings of the SLA, but their mandate is to look at specific items, and this does not meet those parameters. We're talking about stuff that maybe the DOB or FDNY need to look at, and that's sort of, and I get it. It's a public safety hazard if these conditions do exist, but that needs to be addressed in a different forum. And again, not recommending renewal of the license, and let's just say that the SLA says these are wonderful reasons, they're still operating. So the concern being about safety, that needs a different action to address. I mean, you know, I guess liquor helps, I don't know, but I guess because they have a license, but it doesn't mean that they won't be operating.
If we have not reached consensus, which we haven't by way of our vote, and SLA is going to approve it anyway, I suggest that we leave it as is, make it clear by our vote, we don't have a recommendation, and move on.
I agree. Let's leave it at that. Next item on the agenda. fiscal year 2023 district needs. So I've circulated and everyone has had comments on the district needs in an email format prior to this meeting. We've had new needs, we've revised the needs. It's 9:38 p.m. I don't think we can have a robust discussion about district needs at this point, but thankfully we've had it already. And what we need to do today is to take a vote on the 27 items that we've agreed to. I think the only question I would have is just with respect to the local hiring item, which I moved from 9 to 6. Do we feel like that's far enough up, or would you prioritize it over the maternal mortality items, the BQE environmental item, or the pandemic preparedness or resilience item? Does anyone on the committee, or Alejandro?
All these years of knowing me, you know exactly how I feel. I think it should be number one. Everything flows from self-determination and having control over one's life. I do believe maternal and child health is essential. But if you had a community that was fully gainfully employed, a lot of those maternal and child health needs would take care of themselves. We should still have that program across the board, maternal and child health and support. So, but I'm not going to fight for this because I'm just happy to see it in the top 10. I'll be honest with you. And so I'm happy either way. And I really appreciate all the build up to this and everything you've done to incorporate our feedback. So thank you.
No, thank you, Alejandro. Does anyone else have a thought on the local hiring? And if not, I'll move that we take a vote on the 27 as they're written.
I would just to quickly on the local hiring, I'm in agreement with Alejandro. That one was an important one to me too, but I agree that so much flows from it that as long as we get that up there in the top.
Well,
10.
is there, I mean, I don't want to suppress that notion.
You know what I mean?
If we, is there anyone who opposes making local hiring the number one priority from our committee? That's the point, because Alejandro and Emily are clearly in favor of it. And if we're trending in that direction, you know, I wouldn't say 1 versus 6 makes a huge difference, but one does make, you know, number one priority is saying something about what our committee's view is. And that is a subject that we've discussed quite a lot over the past few years.
You know, I get
Go ahead.
Alejandro's point, but it's more than just economics. It's also policies, politics, that all comes into play too. So I can agree with you to a certain extent, but it's just not economics.
Ms. Einhorn, did you have something you wanted to say? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my dog's barking. I was under the impression that we don't have to prioritize the list, that the order of the list is not going to be taken into consideration when it goes in front of the general body. Is
Ms.
that?
Einhorn is correct.
Okay, so it's a moot point?
Right.
Maybe it's a moot point. So let's leave it at this then. We've got some,
Okay.
but I think what's clear is that whether it's local hiring, maternal mortality, the pandemic and resilience, the need to have a task force to address the disparities that resulted from the pandemic and the pollution that comes out of the BQE. And frankly, I've had a challenge, you know, figuring which one should be prioritized over each other when you get even beyond that on there, because who's to say that rat mitigation is and the healthy food for children isn't just as important as these other items. But so we have a list. It's incorporated everybody's feedback. I make a motion that we approve these 24 items as our district needs for fiscal year 2023.
Second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I think Mr. Andrews got you by a nose, Mr. Harrison. So Mr. Andrews will have the second. And any discussion? No discussion. Okay, I obviously vote in favor. Ms. Anadu?
Yay, yes.
Okay, Ms. McKnight? Yes. Ms. Einhorn?
Yes.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Ms. Cobb? Yes. Okay. Ms. Thurston? Yes. Mr. Varela?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Did I get you, Mr. Newmark?
Oh, you hadn't asked me yet.
Okay,
I vote yes.
okay, Ms. Cumberbatch,
Yes.
great. Did I miss anybody? Did anybody not vote? It's unanimous. We have approved our district needs for 2023. Thanks for the discussion. I think this is the one item we completed within the time limits for our meeting tonight. Chairperson's report, I'm gonna defer that to next month. I won't delay this meeting any longer. Other business. Anyone have any other business that they want to raise? Mr. Newmark.
Yeah, I want to say this in the most respectful, polite way I possibly can. I think our meetings can be briefer and not run till 9:30, 10 o'clock every single time we meet. Either we need more meetings or we need to figure out a way to be more time conscious, because this is becoming very uncomfortable for me unless we know ahead of time that we're going to be scheduled from 6 to 10. Then I can do what I have to do to be prepared to sit for 4 hours and do what we have to do. But if I think it's from 6 to 8 and we're running till 9:30, 10 o'clock every time, it's really not doable. So, I have to say I have the greatest respect for you as the chairperson of this committee. I think you're the best chairperson I've experienced since I've been on the committee, and that's a number of years. I've seen several other chairpersons, all who tried to do a great job. I think you're the best and the greatest and the most qualified, but you got to learn how to run a meeting within a time period that is real. Don't let things go on for as long as you do.
Okay, that point is noted, and what can I say? We have to make the meeting shorter, and we'll find a way to do it for next month. I can't make this meeting any shorter than it is, and I guarantee you're not the only one who feels that way, Barry.
I appreciate you taking it the way in which it was given, Brandon.
Fair enough. Any other business or comments on Barry's comment?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Andrews.
the problem we're gonna have again, if we invite those people that who run the comedy club, that's where our problem ran. That's where the problem ran right there.
Okay.
Might I
Ms. Cumberbatch,
suggest
I'm
something?
sorry, Ms. Cumberbatch has her hand raised.
Oh,
I
sorry.
was just going to piggyback on Barry in terms of my experience with meetings is just looking at what's on the agenda ahead of time. If we're going to be doing approvals for licenses and we're having presentations at the same time, it's going to run late. I don't know how folks feel about having separate meetings in reference to presentations, maybe a separate shorter meeting, but just a thought.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cumberbatch. Ms. Einhorn?
Hey, I'm concerned about the district statement of needs timeline. There's no vote for the general body that's been scheduled, and if we don't submit it by the 29th, it's not going to get submitted.
All right.
Hi.
Ms. Church, do you want to add anything to this? I want to just wrap this up because we can't afford for this to go much longer than it already has. But if you want to respond to Ms. Einhorn's point briefly, and if you have any other comments you wanted to raise, please do so.
Yeah, so I don't want to make excuses, but this has been a really strange year for us. However, the Department of City Planning knows that we're going to be submitting after our November general meeting. And, I hate to say it, it's not the first time they would have heard it from any board. And it's just going to be the November meeting.
No, that's fine. As long as we're able to submit. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
Thank you and for the meeting and the running, and I do have feedback about how maybe we can cut, and I will do that on over email. I also just want to underscore, because if we'd had more time, I would have also mentioned the earlier sort of interaction between John and Jessica, they got a little bit uncomfortable and unfriendly. And I know, Brandon, that you addressed it, and so I will also send an email about that. It was uncomfortable, and I just want to underscore what you said about all of us respecting each other. And I think it's a bit of a longer conversation. We are a kind of a small community here, and it's nice that we all have developed relatively respectful relationships, and I don't want to see that go off the rails. And so that was, yeah, anyway, I will send something longer. The meeting did go long, and I don't want to add to it. So thank you, Brandon, for saying something in the moment. And I think it can be a longer conversation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Varela. And is there anybody else who has other business? All right. Community forum. Any members of the public who have any points for community forum? I hear nobody. Approval of the minutes from September 1st, 2021.
Second.
I was going to move to approve. I'll take that as a second. I vote in favor. Alejandro, how do you vote? Ms. Cumberbatch?
Yes.
Ms. Einhorn?
Yes.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Ms. Cobb? Ms. Thurston? Ms. Nadu?
Dane.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Ms. McKnight?
Yes.
And I think I got everybody. So minutes are approved.
Excuse me, I abstain because I wasn't there.
Okay. We'll mark you as an abstain. All right. Before we take a motion to adjourn, I will just say this. It's 9:50. I agree, this is not acceptable for when we should be ending our meetings. And to those of you who've made points about this, I 100% agree with you on that. So we will absolutely keep that in mind for future agendas and future meetings. I do also want to note that much like the presentation that we had from the providers, from the presentation that Barry gives on COVID-19, the presentation that we get from each of the liquor license applicants, and our general obligation to the public, we do have a requirement to be responsive to the public in these meetings. But with that said, I think we can do it a lot swifter. And I want to say, regarding the exchange that happened earlier, I expect that there's not going to be any more disrespectful comments. The least that I expected was that it would come from somebody in the committee. And it's one thing if it's a public, but we are supposed to be representatives of the public. And it's not appropriate to make a comment to anybody who is in any way that is disparaging or making anybody feel less than they should. I completely reject that, and I hope that we will each take this point away as a way to ensure that it never happens again on this committee. With that said, is there anyone who would like to make a motion to adjourn? Ms.
I
McKnight?
make a motion to adjourn.
Ms. McKnight gets the motion. Mr. Andrews, you get the second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.